Thank you, Trapani.
Trapani. Sorry, I did it anyway. Paul Trapani, yes. Well, we've known each other for a couple of decades.
Right.
Right, and I just never had to say your last name before until tonight. So, yeah, thanks for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
How was your commute?
Not bad. Walked around the corner.
He works in the building, so yeah, he walked around the corner. I really appreciate you being on. So you have one of the best computer social networks of anybody I know. I think you might even beat me. So I know a lot of geeks, but I think you might even know more geeks.
I know a few, yeah.
Yeah, and it's because you run the Digital Ballpark through LetsNet.
Right.
And
Correct.
you just know all these people have offices here and meet here, and it's a tech incubator, and it's awesome. And my user group meets here, so thank you so much for setting that up.
Oh, glad to. And it's only 3 years old, so imagine what the next 3 years will bring.
Yeah, that's true. It's only 3 years old.
Only 3 years as of May.
Wow, so we were basically here from the beginning.
Yeah.
Ah, we lucked out. Yes. Yeah. All right. So I just wanted to bring up a couple news things. So one of the things is in the news. This is not tech news, but this is just something that. Well, let me bring up Java first. So if you're using Java in a commercial environment, April 16th is actually the deadline. So that was yesterday, I think.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was yesterday.
2 days ago.
2 days ago. So you might be having a problem with the Business Software Alliance pretty soon. They changed their license. It's not open source anymore.
Huh.
They changed it as of January, and then there was some other change again on April 16th. So if you're a business, you're expected to pay.
Wow.
Yeah. So I don't even know. This is huge because Java's in everything.
Yeah.
Specifically, I think it's embedded devices. They said if you're a hobbyist, there's no consequences.
Right.
But so, in case you don't know, the history of this is that Sun Microsystems wrote and owned Java, and then they open sourced Java, and then people started using Java for reference code, and they started using it to teach computer science.
Right.
And and now they just pulled it. They did this license change when it got. So Sun Microsystems was sold to Oracle, and Oracle is changed the license like twice now. I think this might even not be the second time, might be the third time. And it's if your business model depends on Java being free, you're kind of screwed.
Even existing applications.
So this is like a huge.
Wow.
This is like a huge boost for open source, but you got to be ready to fork. So I don't know if there's any. I know there's free Javas out there that are incomplete. But like there's a J, there's definitely a thing called J, I think, that's open source. But anyway, look it up. There are free Javas out there. You might not be screwed if you can switch to one of them, but if you're using the official Oracle Java for your product, you might be up a creek. So take a look at the license. Have your lawyer look at it. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, and this is why I wanted to do the second, because this is probably going to lead to another conversation. I was really horrified when I saw Notre Dame burned to the ground.
Yeah, terrible.
I thought a lot about it, and I was trying to. A lot of people were jumping on there and saying this and saying that, and I wanted to think carefully about what I said. Notre Dame is a wonder of the world. This is one of humanity's greatest achievements. It was one of the, I don't know if it was ever technically the largest building in the world, but it was one of like the top three for centuries.
Right.
It was an engineering marvel, and I'm sure there have been tens of thousands of people who have walked into that place and went, human beings did this with hand tools, for the first time when no one even knew it was possible.
Without calculators and computers for the engineering.
Without calculators and computers, or even or even a lot of the math. I think Newton was after it.
Right.
So they don't even know how parts of it were built.
Right.
So they had to invent the math just to build the one structure. So it really bothers me that this could happen. Now, I don't want to blame anyone. Some people are saying it's the Catholics' fault, that they weren't paying enough attention. Some people saying it's France's fault. Some people are saying it's the EU's fault. I think it's humanity's fault, at least to a small degree. So this brings up the problem of the commons. When we have something, a resource or a property or something that we all use, whose responsibility is it to take care of it? I mean, I know technically the property belongs to the Catholic Church, so it's on them to manage it.
Right.
But I mean, you know, fishing companies have private boats, and they you know, once they catch fish, they belong to that company.
Right.
But they are on a public ocean.
Right.
So where is the crossover? Where is it? Where do we hit the point where you say, okay, this is everybody's fault now?
Right.
So I don't know if you have.
Well, it's interesting because I'll talk a little about this space, and you know, on the one hand, some people might say, well, government should do it, and then the problem with that is government is not efficient at doing most things, and especially things like that. It just adds overhead.
Right.
Like this space here was created by ListNet approaching Infosys International, would own the building. Actually, we came to their Christmas party a little over 3 years ago, and they had this space open, and we took a look at it and said, you know, yeah, you know, we could maybe do something with it. And it was only 9 offices at the time, and they had an office for us, and we moved in, and then, you know, he had a tenant for the space, but then that fell through. So we kind of put in some money, they put in some money, and we built 9 offices, and they were filled before we opened. So we said, all right, how about the rest of your building? So we kind of kicked in some money, and he kicked in some money, and
really? So you rented out all the offices right off the bat?
Right off the bat, yeah.
And then you had to just expand because you couldn't even...
Yeah. So, and it was completely bootstrapped. Like, you know, we just ListNet kicked in money, they kicked in money. You know, some tenants wanted to pay for things and paid for things. So I do believe there is a way to have people pay for stuff on a voluntary basis, you know, and that can work, but it's got to be set up properly, you know.
Right. So, I mean, so one of the things that stands out about that story is that you're new.
Right.
It's a new organization. You know, theoretically, none of us are that famous or anything. You know, we're just, you know, we may be locally famous or know people locally, but it's not like there's some momentum where everybody's, you know, just walks out and, oh yeah, this is going to work because it's worked before. What I'm talking about in a broader sense is like identity. You know, there isn't some identity where everybody's like, oh yes, we all have the same objectives.
But it also came out of like previous efforts. Like ListNet's been around for 20 years. I first came to ListNet. Now I'm president of ListNet, but I first came to it in 2005. They had a place in Great River called the Long Island Tech Center. And it wasn't quite the same concept, but the idea was to get a bunch of tech companies in the building. And I was starting a tech company. I said, great, Long Island Tech Center.
So ListNet is your baby?
Now, yeah. But I came to ListNet. It was started by Peter Goldsmith in, 22 years ago, and a group of people.
Yeah, I think I met him, right?
Yeah, you met Peter. I mean, the ListNet came out of when Grumman was bought by Northrop. All of a sudden, all these jobs left Long Island. And a group of people decided to kind of see, well, what can help Long Island? And something was created called Project Long Island, which Peter Goldsmith ran. And the conclusion was, well, technology. So they said, well, let's make an organization and promote it. And, I think there were a few people in a room. They all kicked in $100 on the first meeting, and it grew from there, to now we have thousands of members. But I came to that building in 2005. I was a techie, and I had started a company. I didn't know anything about business.
What was your specialty?
I was like an analyst programmer.
Okay.
So I kind of figure out what needs to be built, and I build it. Dabbled in some tech support.
Do you have to?
Do I have to? Was part of
sooner or later, a user forces you into tech support.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I worked for a company. And I met my business partner, Peter Zanakis, there. And he was kind of like the network system admin guy. I was the developer. This was the mid-'90s where everyone was going to get rich. Nobody did. That company kind of fell apart. And, we both found ourselves on our own. And I would bring him into my programming clients saying, hey, these guys, their network is a mess. They need a server. They need this. And he'd get that going. And he'd bring me in saying, well, they need a database, so they need this built. And eventually we started saying, we're cross-billing each other, but we have 2 accountants, 2 attorneys, this or that. Why don't we make one company and cut our costs, And that's where we got this office over there.
So originally it was just 2 companies sharing overhead.
We were kind of like contractors, we were both out of our house, so kind of call it a company, but
right, I got
but
it.
not a real company.
Yeah, I got it.
But I think what it really did for us.
You know what? I don't want to gloss over that, because I think that's important. Being a guy that had full-time jobs for my whole career up until 2 years ago, any kind of business that you're going to get into, it just kind of starts like that.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have a parade and blimps and endorsements from everybody and everybody.
Right.
And a $1 million bank loan, and you're just tinkering.
Right.
And then it succeeds.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the good things about creating a partnership and then having an office and having recurring overhead is it made us look at things differently. And we said, well, if we know rent is $800 a month and phones are this much and this much, well, we better make sure that we, on the income side, have at least $2,000 a month coming to cover basic overhead. And I think that's the step from just a person like doing work versus like building a business. That transition of looking at it as, how can my income stream cover my expense stream?
Right.
Now, the other thing that we lucked out on, and I didn't know ListNet at the time, we were right upstairs from ListNet.
So the first job is almost like learning how to manage your money and how to manage your how to keep your columns balanced.
And the other thing that we did, because we were partners, and I tell people that are business owners now to do this, because we were partners, when I just ran my own consulting operation, I just had money in the bank, and when I needed money, I took money. But now that we were partners, we said, okay, let's set up salaries for ourselves. And it really makes you treat it more like a business. So now, I have a small business. I'm kind of just on my own, and I use subcontractors, but I still run my business that same way. I pay myself a salary.
Being married is kind of like that too.
Yes.
Sorry, keep going.
But it's a tremendous help in terms of how you run it, and I learned all that. Now, so we happened to be upstairs from ListNet, they used to host their events there and all that. And I remember we went to like a Microsoft event that they were launching some version of Windows or something, maybe XP or something, I don't know, whatever 2005 was.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that was, no, it wasn't XP. Was it XP?
I don't know. Who knows anymore?
No, XP, because I was at Cold Spring. XP was the end of, well, they announced it. But
okay.
Yeah, maybe it was XP. Vista.
Okay.
Yay!
All right, so not very memorable, but it was a big Microsoft event. And
yeah, you think?
At the end,
it was memorable, just not in a good way.
At the end, this guy comes over to us and starts talking to us. What are you guys doing? What are your companies? And and my business partner Peter looks at me and goes, "Who was that?" And I go, well, that's Peter Goldsmith. He's president of ListNet. And I was just so impressed by the fact that we're two nobodies just starting a company, and he came to us and he wanted to know about our company and what we were doing.
Right.
And it really gave me a boost. Like, wow, this guy runs this organization. He's been around on Long Island for years, and here we are with a new company, and someone's asking us about us. It really made me feel like wow, I have a company.
Wow, yeah, that's good.
So then we became part of the mentoring program.
It was a moment of zen.
It was a moment of zen.
Yeah.
It was a moment of zen. They had a mentoring program that taught us a lot of business stuff, which was extremely useful. And we ended up moving to an incubator they had at Briarcliff College. So again, like this, but a little more of an incubator. It was at a college. It was a little bit different. And later on, a few moves after that, we tried something with ListNet and Hotbog called the Tech Mall.
Right.
I won't go into too many details other than to say it failed.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the things I'm starting to figure out too, is that you can't be afraid to fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is, if you're in, you can, it's almost like, oh, fuck it.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're a business virgin.
Right.
If you're afraid, if you think you can't fail once, you just don't know what the hell you're doing.
And I remember the newspapers made a big deal about it, and they published cartoons about, oh, people say Long Island needs these spaces, and I remember talking to a reporter, and he asked me about it, and I'm like, well, when we wanted to go into space, a lot of failure happened. I mean, even failure, people died. And that's what it takes.
And not just the astronauts, people on the ground too.
And even though I didn't know what the future would hold, I'm like, even though it wasn't, for many reasons successful, but out of that, people that were there went on to start Launchpad Long Island, you know, and this came out of that as well. So, you know, without that.
Wait a minute, aren't you competing with Launchpad?
No, not really.
No.
No. The Huntington Launchpad is run by one of the guys there is eGifter. They kind of have the space, and they're the primary tenant. He's the vice chairman of ListNet.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, so really you're not? Okay.
No.
All right, I completely had that wrong. I imagine you guys competing like,
no, because
we want the best tech companies. No, we want the best.
Look, there might be, you know, competition for individual companies.
Of course, you're both participating in markets.
Right.
And markets always compete.
Right, but we're on friendly terms, especially with Huntington Launchpad.
Right.
And you know, to me, you know, that kind of competition is good because it's creating a bigger ecosystem. And you know, when we set out to create this space, you know, our spin is we're tech focused, and you know, we kind of try to keep tenants here in the tech or creative space.
Right.
You know, so do we stretch it once in a while? We do.
Well, hold on a second.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this show,
Right.
you haven't seen the stretches that are coming.
Right.
So there are. I'll tell you right now, there are stretches coming with Yes.
Right.
But you know what? The truth is, we're living in a technocracy.
Right.
Everything is tech.
Right.
Whether you like it or not, even
Sure.
if you hate it,
Right.
even if you're freaking Amish,
Right.
you're still competing with guys that have microchips in their hand tools.
Right.
You know, so at some point, it doesn't matter if you're not using the technology yourself; you're still affected by it.
Right. Well, ListNet started out as having, and we still do now, but technology industry members and affiliate members. And more, like it's like, well, what company's not really a technology company? Like every company on Long Island uses technology. Every you know.
Laugh at me.
Well, so you know, yeah, and being in the tech field, you know, it just the growth potential is just unlimited because there's just the ever expanding.
However disorganized you are, there's probably a computerized solution. It's just a question if it's the right price point to fix it.
So this space is an example of something that came to be by, you know, a nonprofit organization collaborating with a private industry, collaborating with all the tenants here to make this successful.
Right.
You know, and
yeah, that's great.
But again, there was a lot of.
How many tenants do you have?
We have about 24 companies that are in this space.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't even know it was that many.
Yeah, because we have offices on the other side now. So
nice.
Yeah.
So you have spies everywhere. I mean, offices everywhere.
There's spies everywhere. Yeah.
Well, that's a great story.
Yeah.
I had no idea about any of that.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show.
Yeah.
Because that way you can't climb up. You got to tell me the whole story.
One footnote, because you know, sometimes you can get bummed out by things. When we had the Tech Mall, I came and looked at this space. It was going to be Tech Mall number 2. And it didn't happen. And I walked away so bummed that didn't happen. And then years later, the opportunity came, the same space, and I was like, wow, you know?
Yeah, you know what? Everything happens for a reason. Yeah. I've had the same thing where I was really bummed out that something went one way, and later on I'm like, well, thank God that went that way. That would have been a disaster, right? So yeah, it's not always. Sometimes it's not always the best to burn through everything in one shot.
So.
Yeah, that's really great. So I got a question. Since you know everyone, is there anyone you'd like to have on the show, on my show?
Yeah, a couple of people. One is Ed Eisenstein. He's the former CIO of Nassau County.
Okay, so Ed Eisenstein. Okay.
And Walden Leverich, who I think you met.
So
runs a company called Tech Software.
Okay. What does Tech Software do?
They make software for the
I mean, obviously tech and software.
Industry review boards.
Industry review? What the hell is that?
So when they do clinical trials.
Medical clinical trials?
Industry review boards kind of like oversee that.
Okay, cool.
And his software kind of helps
that would be super interesting.
Yeah.
Both of those would be super interesting.
Yeah.
And anybody else, or? I know. I wanted to have. Wanted to ask Bill. I haven't gotten around to doing it yet.
Bill's very smart.
Yeah, Bill's also got a company here, and he's part of our user group too.
Yeah.
So.
Bill Catlin.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. See, you actually study and figured out how to pronounce people's names, unlike me. Yeah, we did that whole thing, and I still blew it.
Yeah.
Trapani, right?
Trapani.
Yeah. Trapani.
You got it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. See, I got it. Like I had to see me with Dr. Raris Kochoba. I did that like 30 times before I got it right. Because it's spelled, it really is, it's different phonetically.
Yeah.
They have more consonants over there. They're like, yeah, there's a vowel drought. We only have consonants. All right, so I wanted to know, so is there any, let me ask you, well, let me ask you first of all, is there something that you wanted to talk about? I know you've watched the show before.
Sure.
So is there something specifically that you want to...
I want to talk about how I got into computing. Or what got me.
Oh yeah, you were a Commodore head, right?
What made me so excited by it?
Here. So I'm gonna totally ambush you. So you sent me notes about the Commodore,
right?
But I want to know what happened before the Commodore. What got you interested in the Commodore in the first place? Like,
all right.
What made you think, oh, I need a computer?
Okay, I'm going to tell you that.
Okay, good. Okay, go for it.
So it started in second grade.
Second grade.
Yeah, I don't know that there's much before that.
Nerd.
In second grade,
I'm a total nerd. I could do that.
They brought my. So I was in the AV club, and I'm proud of that. I was in elementary school. I was in the AV club.
I was always friends with the AV club. They got the good stuff.
So before the computer, I guess maybe in second, I was helping.
They had the best hall passes. The AV club.
I was helping the teachers run the film projectors in the classroom.
Yeah.
You know those little film strip machines, and you had to thread the film.
Oh yeah, that was the standard film watching procedure, right? You have a half-hour film, and a 40 or 50-minute window to watch in. Yeah. The teacher has to go and mess with the thing for 3 or 4 minutes. But the teachers couldn't do it, so mess it up and go, I give up, and then you go up and help.
I was the guy being sent to do that. Yeah.
Put your cape on, right, here I come.
Yeah. So before computers was the AV club.
Nice. Very Stranger Things.
Yeah. In second grade, they brought people into the library, and they had a computer there. It was a Commodore VIC-20, black and white. And they typed a program on it, and it was a 2-line program. 10 print, whatever, hello.
Right, and hello world, obligatory hello world.
And 20 go to 10, and it would just print it all over the screen, and they put a semicolon so it would go across. But here's what did it for me. That was one thing to say, oh, you could make this thing do it. Then they went and they changed it. And I said, wow, here's a thing that you could make do whatever you want, So that was one incident that's etched in my mind. Like you could tell this machine.
Was the second program a curse?
No, it was not. No, second grade.
Nice.
Come on, no.
I think it was for me. Go ahead.
So the moment that made me want a computer, so that just made me very excited. But here's what made it even better. It made me just beg my parents for a computer.
Yeah.
I was in the store. It might have been a toy store or whatever. One of the innovative things Commodore did, they sold their computers in regular stores other than hobbyist stores. So they really had the notion, like Macy's or Toys R Us. Their notion was, and really if you think about it, now we just take it for granted that anyone would buy a computer, but at the time,
you can't even stop it.
You had to be like a Bill Gates nerd that wanted to buy a kit and put it together yourself and all that, versus buy this thing already made and do stuff with it.
I swear, there was a whole generation of people who didn't buy a computer because they just like repeating the Apple in the garage store. Like, I'm not a garage nerd. I don't need a computer.
Right. So I was typing on this computer, and I had learned a few things at that time, and I hit run, and it said error on line 50. And that blew my mind. I'm like, wow, this thing knows that I made a mistake. And it knows where it is. I mean, just think about that. We take it for granted now, but
God, what happened?
Think 70s before computers.
Go to line 50.
Right.
Yes.
Just
and it will smite you just as hard if you mess up.
Yeah. And that, I had to have one at that point. I said, this is the future. This is just unbelievable.
Right.
That this machine knows where you messed up.
Right.
And tells you, hey, go fix this,
And that's the entire history of programming right there. It never got any better. Program error, program error, program error. Right. No errors. Did you test it? I tested it. Yeah. No test suite, but just for my cases, it runs, compiles.
So, and that was.
Did you write any games, or what did you use it to solve a problem?
I bought magazines and I typed the programs in. I changed them. I mean, one of the great things about Commodore is a lot of the games you could go into the source code and you could mess around. I mean, that's how I learned. I just I took programs other people wrote and I said, oh, let me change this. Let me mess around. Let me see what happens. I had a project for an English class where you could do you had to like learn something, and I wrote like a hangman program, you know, and it was like great, you know, it was like just doing that was like.
So I've been playing a lot of Team Fortress lately, and you know, I mean, it's an ancient game, but you know, the best part, Team Fortress started as a mod for another game, you know, like that's where it's at, and changing other people's programs and other people's source and making something new out of it. But that's the whole open source vision movement, you know, and I'm not against intellectual property. I'm just against holding people hostage. You know, that's where it gets weird. So
that, you know, and then after that I ended up with an Amiga, which was also ahead of its time, had true multitasking, you know, like 12-bit color, so you had like 4,096 colors. You know,
remember CGA?
CGA was horrible.
CGA is 4 colors, so it was pretty. EGA was the shiznit. Because then you had 16 colors, and you could pick the 16 colors. So you could make it pretty good with pixelization and blending and stuff.
But I remember when I went to get my Amiga, you know, I was in the store, and I got one that had, at the time it was called a bridge board. It lets you boot it as a PC. And I partitioned it half Amiga, half PC. And the guy said to me, most people buy this and then they wipe out the PC partition. I said, no, there's all these games and all this stuff. And it's true, there were all the PC stuff, and my friends all had PC stuff, but the Amiga stuff was so much better that I eventually wiped out the PC partition. I said,
the PC gaming scene was abysmal.
But no, I loved my Amiga. I mean, I used it for so many years.
My neighbors had a Commodore 64. So when we got a 286 with an EGA, that's when they started making games. Before that, they didn't really. It was always one-off games that people did as a proof of concept and just either like released it for free or for $5, or they were shareware, or there were you go over to Newegg back when it was a physical store. I don't know if anybody knows that, but it was a physical store at one point, and you could just there were some games you could buy, particularly Sierra games were very good on PC. That was the saving grace.
I mean, people also traded Commodore games at school also. Now I always
one of my friends, I met him. I'll probably tell the story again. I hope he'll be on the show one day. I met him when I tried to sell him a piece of software that wasn't mine. So I think I technically just committed a crime. Whatever. Anyway, keep going.
All right. So no, that was that's what got me into it. Just that lure, that and also in second grade.
So you came in after the PET.
Yeah. Also in second grade, I had a teacher. I had a beautiful first grade teacher. Got us into like doing all kinds of creative stuff. I had a teacher that would give us like dittos almost like every class, like pieces of paper to fill out, and I hated it. I would crumble them up and shove them in my desk. And then like once a month or so, she'd dump out my desk and make me like uncrumble those papers.
I think we would have got along fine.
So that's the other thing that got me into computers, is realizing that like tedious work like doesn't have to be like, if you know like 2 + 3 is 5, why do you have to like write it out like 15 times or like other stupid shit like that?
So we've gone into education rants on here before. I don't want to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I mean, they're still treating schools like factories. It's not good. I mean, my kids are there. They're still training them like factory workers. And I mean, we're talking about full automation in their lifetime, for sure. I mean, I would be really shocked if any more than 20% of their jobs were toil. That's what, that's the toil is the standard for. If you're toiling now, it's time to at least examine if you can do it cheaper with a computer or with robotics. And yeah, I mean, I would be shocked if the job market was more than 20% toil, and everything in school is toil.
And it's a
what are you training
subject,
them for?
But like, I think, of course, we should try to have a world where as many people as possible can do well and work and all that, but like, we shouldn't try to create too many more toil jobs just for the sake of having them.
Well, we can't. I don't think it's going to be, because it won't be cost effective. All right, so there's always going to be boutique jobs, right? Oh, this was handcrafted by 2 humans, right? It's always going to be like a status thing.
That's got like art value. That's got like some.
Not everybody's going to care about art value. No, you got to get your basics taken care of first. If you're not in the hierarchy, if you don't have your food, clothing, and shelter taken care of, and you're sure they're going to be there, you don't care about art value. So, Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. I think that, I mean, it was fine for us.
Right.
I could understand the lack of vision then.
Right.
But I mean, you know, politicians,
right.
you know, teachers, government officials,
right.
Nobody can shut up about how important STEM is. Well, the first thing you got to do, what do all the science and technology jobs have in common? Computers.
Right.
What do all the computers have in common? If you're toiling, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is...
I know there's some memorization. Learning will always be some toil.
But like the high schools, they give like math teachers double duty on teaching computers, and some of them are into it, but some of them are not.
Right.
I was very lucky to have teachers all along the way that were into it, but you know.
My mom was a math and computer teacher and a business teacher.
Yeah.
So that was like the trifecta of good for me.
Yeah.
Early exposure is definitely really important. For me, it was the original PC, and that was the one because she was teaching business. It was actually from her business classes that I got my hands on my first computer. And of course, my neighbors were all cooler than I was because I had this Commodore 64. Yeah, you know, I didn't have all the cool graphics, but it did give me some advantages, especially early on in my career. Sure, because I had 15 years experience in DOS. Right. When I when my first job, I walk in the door and I got 15 years of DOS under my belt. So. Yeah.
I did a lot on the Apples at school also, the Apple IIs and whatnot, that whole line of computers also.
It does count having the right using the technology that they're using in the field. It does help. Right. But I think that's becoming less important. You know, like because I'm thinking about like Java. Right. Like we were talking earlier about Java, and like a lot of people learn computer science and programming on Java. Right. They kind of if that's the only thing they learn, they're kind of screwed. You know. Yeah. If you only know 2 languages, learn your third. It's time. Yeah.
Well, I also think, a lot of times they pick Java as the first language for whatever academic reasons, but I think like someone learning it, you should make it like as easy as possible and eliminate frustration. A lot of people drop out of computer science because of frustration. Right.
What do you think is the frustrations with? Just a lack of...
The complexity. Like I learned BASIC, and BASIC's not the best language. You can't do that much with it, but you can learn it, pretty easily and actually build stuff with it, And
this is something that's really important for civics, for the commons, for the human commons. Right. On the one hand, you want everyone who's capable of doing the work to at least, I think we reached the point where you want everyone who's capable of doing computer work to at least know how to do it. Right. Because on the other hand, I don't know. I mean, this is something that I've argued with my guests, and I'm not certain I'm right about this, but it seems like some people just are never going to be able to learn it. I think some of it is natural capacity, and some of it is work. And you can throw all the work you want at people without the natural capacity, and all you're doing is torturing them. So I mean, this lends itself to much bigger issues like UBI, like universal basic income. And by the way, the alternative is shorter work week. So either one.
I'm down with the shorter work week.
Well, they already do it in Europe. Right. France they're only 34 hours or 35 hours, and they have bigger vacations and they have bigger maternity leave. I mean, we may be forced to do that to keep the labor pool competitive. Right. So that people can get jobs.
But I love my work, so I would probably just work anyway. But I'm very fortunate to be doing things I love.
I love geeking out, and I can sit. My wife mocks me that my chair is shaped exactly like my butt because I'm always in it. Right. But at the same time, I really enjoy it when I'm just doing physical labor and stuff because sometimes it's a relief. Right. Because it's so simple compared to the thinking process that's going on. If I'm mowing the lawn, I just walk back and forth in rows. It's simple. Right. It's not like you need to. But if I can feel like that for a minute, I can't imagine how someone who just doesn't have the natural capacity, and pushing STEM too hard is actually cruel at some point. I don't know. Do you agree with that? Is that true, or
is there
some point where you're just you're just torturing someone and expecting them to learn something they're never going to learn, and you're just going to criticize them because they can't?
I don't know. I mean, because why can't they learn it? Did they not have the proper foundation? Why do certain schools in wealthier districts produce better students than schools in poorer districts? You have to look at that too.
For sure, there's a privilege aspect to it. My grandma was an accountant.
Right.
My mom taught computers and business, and so I had access to this stuff early. I had a huge advantage.
Like if I didn't see that computer in second grade and my parents didn't have the money to buy me a computer, maybe I'm not where I am now.
So there's two answers to that. One is this. So you brought your Altoids.
I brought my Altoids Raspberry Pi.
So an Altoids is what, $2?
Yeah.
$3 maybe at the supermarket. So you can get the tin for $3. You can get the Raspberry Pi for 20 something or 30 something if you go to, I think it's 29 at Micro Center.
Yeah, I got that at Micro Center.
Right. Yeah. So they've got one of the cheapest local prices for it. But you can get them really cheap, and that's a pretty good computer.
Right.
It goes on the internet. You got an Ethernet port. You got Wi-Fi. So the one is, access is no longer a problem.
True.
It's cheap.
Right.
If you're really looking for a way to get in.
That's true.
So the real question is it capacity? So here's my counter argument to you.
Okay.
And so most people don't realize, but there's a ton of mentally ill people, and I mean this in the kindest way possible. But if you have a mental illness that prevents you from doing a certain kind of job, whichever kind of job it is, that it's an illness, right? You need to, even if you not ever technically classified, and I'm not even sure that's a good idea for parents to do that, because it can backfire and it can be used politically against you. But there definitely are a ton of mentally ill geeks, and we all kind of joke about it, but it's the autism spectrum. There are so many people on the autism spectrum in computers. I think that's an anecdotal proof that maybe having certain skill sets which are not available to everybody is, and combined with, first of all, that, and also the fact that so many people on the spectrum, on the autistic spectrum, because there's a lot of spectrums now, so specifically the autistic spectrum, also tend to be very good at music. And I've experienced this in the industry. There's tons of musicians in our industry. So it's kind of like, now, I'm not saying anybody should be excluded. Absolutely not. That's unacceptable. People should have the same opportunities, but also people shouldn't be tortured and expected to learn something they're just never going to learn.
Fair enough, but
maybe we can make the interfaces on the computers easier. So
but I think there's
the way they think.
There's a basic level of comfortableness with technology that if someone doesn't have, it's going to hurt them, and more in the future. Now, I don't know. I mean, the generations coming up now, the mobile phones and everything is native to them. So, like, who knows? Maybe, maybe I'm thinking maybe that doesn't apply to them. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. There's some hints out there for sure.
Yeah.
There's some hints that even if maybe it's a different learning process also. I don't want to be totally negative about it. I don't want to, you're doomed. We're just going to have to rig the whole system so that you can survive. I don't
think everybody should have to learn coding.
Well, I think everybody should learn coding, but maybe we need to make coding a little less, from the mount on high. You have an error on line 50. What? That's not how some people think. Like some people are like, well, if we actually did what you asked us to, this would be the result. I don't know any compilers that give you errors like that. Maybe that's that kind of mentality and that kind of thinking.
You can do that now, and you have.
I think there's more of that coming.
You have games. I mean, I read an interesting article years ago that always stuck with me, that said games were doing a better job of teaching kids than schools were in many cases, because they had to make them challenging enough that they wouldn't just be easily solved, but also solvable. So the market forces created something that would force people to get better. For a game to be good, it couldn't be too easy, and it couldn't be unsolvable, and it had to be entertaining enough for you to want to keep playing it. And there's games now that are actually the same skills you use in programming that people don't realize. Like Minecraft is a great, a perfect example.
Yes, I have built some fairly advanced machines in Minecraft, and people have. If you don't know this somehow, people have built entire functioning computers inside of Minecraft because the redstone rules are so consistent. I don't know if that's been true recently. I assume it's still true.
Well, I'm guessing
Microsoft will probably get beat up if it wasn't still true.
I don't know officially. Maybe we can get an answer on this, but I believe Minecraft is Turing Complete. And Turing Complete means you can do anything a computer can do in that system.
Right. Right, it's just slow.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Of course, if you build a big enough redstone machine,
Yeah.
I've done it.
Right.
I've built a big enough one on a slow enough computer where the host computer is like, it's grinding.
So the creator Notch of Minecraft, before he sold it over to Microsoft, said in an interview that because of the redstone rules, it is in fact Turing Complete.
Wow. Wow.
So who knows if it's still true, but
yeah.
I mean, in light of this Java thing,
or rather, it allows for construction of Turing Complete machines. But yeah,
okay.
Notch is freaking brilliant, man. I mean, he got out of Minecraft before this Java thing happened. Minecraft runs in Java.
Does it? Oh.
Yeah. So I don't even know how this affects Minecraft or not. Hopefully, it doesn't hurt it. I mean, it's Microsoft. So if there was ever a company that was prepared to deal with the fallout,
they might be paying licensing already. Like they all.
I'm not. Sometimes Microsoft's been better than most of the big tech companies, but at first I was mad when I first read this about Java, and I was like, these tech companies are not. They're not being. They're not really. They claim to be open source stewards, and they do really do a lot of work in open source in a very narrow channel.
Right.
But they don't necessarily help all of open source. They just help the things that help their company specifically, which is understandable.
Right.
But also kind of negates the claim of these benevolent do-gooders, and so with something like the Java license change, I was like, at first I was mad because I'm like, why aren't these companies fighting Oracle on this?
Right.
Why aren't they on their case? And then I realized, because they're all in lawsuits with Oracle already.
Right.
You have to dig a little bit, but when you dig into the news, you realize that they all have court cases ongoing where their patent portfolios are pitted against each other. So I don't think it's a case of they're bad actors.
Right.
Like I originally thought. I always go to the conspiracy theory kind of view first, which is not my best personality attribute, but it's good because it inspired me to look deeper.
Right.
And I looked deeper and I realized it's not that they don't want to help, it's that they can't.
Right.
Literally, big companies are incapable of being good stewards. They can't do it.
Right.
Because they got to look out for themselves, and their legal department said, no, we have to sue them. You can't talk about them in public.
Right.
Which is true almost all of the time for almost everybody.
Yeah, I mean that's
what's great about having a smaller organization like you helping small tech companies and having small tech companies that have lower overhead so they can get started, and maybe if they're a little weak on their computer side, they can get stronger because these big companies are incapable of doing it. They literally can't. If they have a big enough legal team on retainer, you can't do it.
Well, I mean, the bigger the entity, the harder it is to manage, and the harder it is to get consensus, and the harder it is for it to move.
Right.
Big company, big organization, what have you, it becomes, the tedium and the levels of cross connections that have to happen just make it almost impossible.
Why is that? What's going on? Is it just because is it an unsolvable problem, or is it something?
In some cases, yeah, because if you think of, a two-person company, there's only one line of communication, right?
Right.
Now, a three-person company, now I've got potentially, 1, 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 1, and so on. And now you get to, a 50-person company. So it just grows exponentially.
Right.
The amount of communication. And now you have more people that have to agree, and you have sub-teams, and you got, and now...
So the organization of reorganizing so that you can split things up into smaller pieces has a non-linear overhead, is what you're saying.
But you also now have, as you grow...
Kind of smart. I didn't plan that.
but also consider this, like you start a company today and you grow it, and I don't know, let's say you start a company in a few years, you have like $100,000 in revenue, and you're thinking, I'm doing pretty good, this is great.
Right.
You're not that worried about someone suing you, this or that, because you're going to be like, whatever, take the company.
Right.
Now let's say you have a $5 million company. Now someone sues you, they might try to squeeze you for $5 million or take your company. Now you want to hold on to that. So now you have lawyers look at everything, so it delays you making decisions. Now you got a $1 billion company, right? Now you're a target. So you're a target because you got money. Because no one wants to sue the guy with $100,000.
If you sue the guy with $100,000, the most you can get out of it is $100,000.
Right.
You sue the $1 billion company, and you're gonna buy an island.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the system. And I don't know ways around it, except
the Google lawsuit against Oracle, by the way, it's at the Supreme Court level now.
Wow.
$9 billion.
Right.
That's what's at stake. Now, I don't think they're going to get $9 billion. That's by the opening offer, but $9 billion.
But that's why I believe in like these grassroots things, like Linus Torvalds creating Linux. Like, you know, here's all this theory about how operating systems should be, this or that, and we're going to create this thing called Herd, and it's going to be the greatest end-all, be-all. And here's this guy just saying, well, I'm just going to make this thing, and, you know.
Right. Well, so somebody had asked, this is something that came up, you know, when you have an open source project, and it butts heads with a giant megacorp, or, you know, a giant, even if it's not really a company, if it's like Arnie was saying, you know, it's one of these patent troll companies.
Troll farm.
You know, it's a troll farm, right? You know, what do you do when you're a little guy and you butt heads with a troll farm? And Linus's take on it was, I don't know if you remember this. His take was just, yeah, don't worry about it. Just do your thing, and when somebody complains you violated a patent, then examine it. Don't worry about software patents. They're just going to make you crazy. Right? Because of course, you know, there might be prior art, there might be, you know, and so they have, for example, in case you're in the open source world and you're in trouble, the EFF will help you. There's also the Linux Foundation, the Linux that will also help you. So, and they have their own patent portfolios that they use to get into the negotiations on behalf of the little guy. But there definitely needs to be more of that community organization. For sure. It'd be nice. Of course, you have the same problem, right? You can't, at some point, you're scaling so big because you're taking on the IBMs and the Googles and the Twitters and the Microsofts of the world.
You have a lot of little
Oracles,
little concentrations of things that together, you know, could take them on. I mean, to me,
it's a shame to invest a lot of time and energy into a business and then just have it. You know, sure, if they make you an offer, they're for to buy it. But if they come after you with the knives out, you're screwed.
I mean, I think we're seeing a shift, right? Like, take Uber as a common example. We're seeing a shift from these massive behemoth things of, you know, corporations and employees to a distributed model of people acting more like independent agents under some umbrella thing.
Oh, so you're saying Uber's more cooperative than a company?
And Uber's not perfect in that regard. I just think it's towards that. I think Uber could be a lot better.
For sure, an Uber type company could work as a cooperative.
So
it could literally be just a union or a guild.
You know, but again, it's got to happen. It can't happen by fiat, right? I think trying to make things happen like by fiat like that, that's what the communists try to do. So let everybody own everything in this, but it just, you know, people take advantage of it, and that's what the fascists try to do on the other side. Say, well, let the government own everything, and then it'll be all right. So you can't can't do one or the other of those. You gotta.
Those people can't manage this giant behemoth. We can. And really, the truth is, nobody can.
Nobody can. And you gotta.
I kind of agree with that. I see that.
You gotta have like something emerge when it makes sense. And it. You know, the market will decide. I'm a big believer that the markets can decide. Now, the problem you have, and intellectual property is a good point, when artificial monopolies are created by government, it makes it not fair for everybody else. And intellectual property is a good example of that. You know, that you say, well, you know,
for sure, intellectual property isn't all bad.
No, I agree.
It isn't. It isn't all bad, and I'm not just saying that because please don't hurt me. I'm also saying that because, you know, definitely creators have been helped with it. But the problem is when it isn't helping creators directly, what the f is it doing then? You know. So, and of course, one of the things that open source did is that or we can go back and say free software. Before there was open source, there was free software. One of the things that free software did, and then eventually open source did too, is they looked at the intellectual property model and said, okay, how can we rig this so that it helps creators more? So they get a bigger, even if it means lowering the overall profit margin. So, and I know I said a dirty word, you know, voluntarily having lower profits is. You know, but that was what the guy from Red Hat, Bob Young, had said. Our goal is not to become the size of Microsoft. The goal is to make Microsoft the size of Red Hat. So, yeah, but that's kind of true, right? You can't. That model is different, you know. And Red Hat's still rich. What did IBM just buy them for? It was $35 billion or something. So I mean, it was a lot of money. It's not like they failed. It's just that they're not Microsoft big.
No. Yeah.
And they're a little, they're a little smaller, but that's okay.
Right.
They still have a good model, and they still contribute a ton of stuff to the open source world.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting because there's arguments to be made about intellectual property in general, but you gotta. You got to work with the system you have. Like, it's like like I would say, in an ideal world, we might not have intellectual property.
Right.
But I don't know that we'll ever have that. Like we can get there.
Well, for sure, it was less unruly when it was shorter.
Right.
Right. And I don't like, for example, the author's the life of the author plus 80 years.
Right.
I understand the life of the author. I understand 80 years. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I understand it.
Right.
Both of them together has nothing to do with the person who originally created the thing.
Yeah.
All you're doing now is paying into a company, which ideally would act kind of like a cooperative, right? But in the worst case, it's just this behemoth that's completely trapped and is forced to take the most aggressive action legally in all cases.
Right.
And sometimes that means not defending the commons, not protecting the Notre Dames of the world from being burned down. I know this is an analogy; it's not literal.
Right.
But when you're in the case of the Catholic Church, how many churches did they manage?
Right.
I mean, of course, someone might go, it's all their fault. But I mean, of course, a church was going to burn down sooner or later. There was going to be a church burning down.
Right.
Just happened to be one that everybody cares about a lot. But when you're big, that happens. It's just it's odds, right? It's just the roll the dice. Right. Even if you lower the odds, something's going to burn down, and sooner or later, it's going to be a high impact event.
Right.
I'm kind of curious. You wanted to talk about Prohibition. So I think this kind of ties right into that.
Sure. Prohibition was an attempt.
Prohibition's over, right?
Yes.
Would you like some wine?
Oh, sure. Let's have some wine in honor of Prohibition being over.
Red or white?
Red.
Red. Okay, good.
Yeah, in honor of Prohibition being over. I mean, although you have kind of a somewhat modern form in terms of marijuana legalization and what's going on with that, but talk about Prohibition. What's interesting about Prohibition? You had a thriving cocktail culture in this country before that, and
so it wasn't 99% alcoholism like the USSR.
Right.
Okay. As far as I know, that's true. That was from a credible source.
And you also, one of the things that happened with Prohibition, not a lot of people know about, it shifted the government from government got a lot of money from alcohol sales.
Right.
And then they moved to more of an income tax model because they didn't have that money anymore. But worse than that, they thought we'll outlaw alcohol and people have more money to go out to restaurants and they'll buy more soda and they'll go to more movies and they'll do more things. But they didn't. They didn't go, restaurants went out of business because they didn't have the high markup alcohol there.
Right.
So all these things
well, the same thing with the rock scene in New York.
Yeah.
There's very few rock clubs in New York. The New York area used to be a rock mecca.
Right.
There were so many rock clubs here. I mean, you could just go to rock club. You could choose between 2 rock clubs every single night of the week, and now you're lucky if you get one.
Right.
And I mean, it's not like rock and roll isn't popular anymore.
Right.
And actually, even in other states, you see plenty of rock institutions.
Right.
But it's just that the rules are so stringent around alcohol.
Right.
It's very hard for clubs to stay in business.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was all the economic good that they thought, and of course, well, cheers.
Cheers. This is not medical advice.
But the other thing it did, so one, now you have the government getting a lot from income tax versus alcohol, which people were happy to pay the tax on, right?
Right.
Because when people buy alcohol or other things, they don't say, wow, I can't believe I'm paying who even knows what the tax is on alcohol?
Right. It varies state by state,
right.
And it's more in some states and less in others. But some states allow you to make your own.
Right.
I think New York is one of the ones that does not.
Right.
Yeah. But people do it anyway.
But you also obviously had the rise of organized crime.
Right.
You said, here's a need. that people want.
Right.
And someone's just declared that this is illegal now, but the demand was still there.
Right.
So you had an entity that evolved to kind of fulfill that demand.
Well, you know, I got my favorite conspiracy theory about it is that it was the oil companies. They were one of the ones that, because Prohibition started to be seriously discussed right around when the combustion engine came out, and once they started to, you know, got away from steam and electricity, and someone put the combustion, and they said, "Oh, this thing will run on alcohol."
Ah, interesting.
Yeah. So you know, you can't really, if you can distill your own alcohol, then you can have all the fuel you want, and nobody can stop you.
Right.
Right. So once cars started getting meaningfully popular, boom, Prohibition. Kind of a weird thing.
Right.
Just like you can't run home heating oil, even though it'll work in your diesel truck. They want to be able to tax it, because the only other alternative is taxing roads, and taxing roads hurts commerce.
Right.
So I think there's some truth to that. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I just, you know, I just look at it as the ultimate example of trying to just legislate something like that, or just declare something and making it so.
Right.
And it just failing in every way possible, because it didn't come from the will of the people. It just came from, hey, there's a bunch of people that want to just...
You're talking about social engineering. You know.
It is kind of a social engineering.
Social engineering is policy.
Yeah. I mean, another potential example of that...
This is my big problem with socialism.
Yeah.
So socialism isn't a total train wreck, but it's pretty bad. There's problems. There's big glaring problems, and unfortunately sometimes its proponents don't want to talk about them.
Right.
They're mad that you even brought up that there ever could be a problem, and it's like, it's hard to take you seriously when you talk like that.
Right.
But you know, that's one of the problems, is that you're constantly having to you're taking people and you're not looking at what they do, which is natural law, right? Most people didn't talk on cell phones when they were driving before the driving cell phone law came around. They didn't, because it was crazy. You know, you'd put the thing to your ear and you'd be talking to someone, and next thing you know, you're halfway in the next lane.
Right.
And you did that once, and you went, "Oh, that's irresponsible. I'll stop doing that."
Right.
And most people would get mad at people who would talk on their cell phones, and then the law was passed.
Right.
They didn't. You know, that's a good example of good law, I think. You know, versus something like Prohibition, where the law completely contradicts what everyone's already doing.
Right. Well, there was a minority that wanted it, or whatever, an interest group that wanted that, and they imposed their will. I mean,
alcoholics are a problem. Destroy all alcohol. What?
Right.
Maybe you should just deal with the alcoholics. Come on, guys. Really?
But again, it didn't accomplish the goal anyway. Like, anybody that wanted to drink, drank. You know. Yeah. And now you had this illegal thing created. You had businesses shut down. You had restaurants suffer. You had, you know, a lot of negative consequence. You know.
Yeah, I mean, the easiest one is the mob, right? You know, the mob was nowhere near
as powerful.
Right. So essentially, because of Prohibition, we had to make machine guns illegal, because nobody was seriously trying to use machine guns on a day-to-day basis until the mafia came along. And the only reason they had to do it is because they were fighting with each other, and because they had competing ultimate authorities. They had competing governments. You know, and you know, I don't care. I'm sorry. You need to get your head examined if you don't realize that governments do the things that they do from behind the point of a gun. You know, you may not like guns, you may not want people to use guns, you may wish society was peaceful and kumbaya, but governments enforce laws through guns, even little laws. It takes a while before the gun shows up, but the gun is what's behind the law. You know, because otherwise, if that wasn't necessary, we could all just have a nice discussion, work it out, and we don't honor it, which most people do most of the time, but the exceptions can be so catastrophic. Yeah, I completely agree with you that Prohibition is a good example of that, and we may get a taste of how it would have went the other way. You know, let's say I was right. Let's say I'm right about taxing the roads instead of taxing the fuel, and that's what they didn't want to do. Now they're doing another thing that people are not inherently following. Everybody who drives in Lower Manhattan already chose to drive in Lower Manhattan, and now they're going to tax the hell out of them. There's going to be a below 60th Street tax in Lower Manhattan. If you didn't know about that, Yeah, guess what? So basically the 59th Street Bridge is the cutoff.
Right.
You know, so the 59th Street Bridge can, because there are people who live more traditional suburban lives. It's still urban.
I hope they're maintaining the infrastructure on the 59th Street Bridge.
Well, they've been trying to for years to get to put up an easy pass lane system there, because they can't do toll booths. They'd have to rip so much stuff down to make the space for the line for the toll booths. But so that I think is going to, as of right now, I didn't hear anything that they're going to put a tax on that. But that there's basically it's going to be a gated community in Lower Manhattan.
Wow.
And to get into it, you got to pay the tax, whether it's electronic gates or not. So I think there's going to be really terrible financial consequences. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see runaway inflation in Lower Manhattan, or maybe not. But I think that there's, whenever you mess with commerce, you know, why did the Romans succeed? Because they had roads. You know, why Manhattan's the, you know, New York City is the biggest city in the country. Why? Because you can. One of the reasons is because it's relatively cheap to move goods in and out of there, and they keep making it more expensive because of poor decision making, because they're trying to make rules to change social behavior, and that's expensive because people don't want to change. They're like, I had a plan. My plan was to do this, and now you're making me do this. And this, I have to pay money to get from here to here. And then I have to pay money to do this. Yeah, not good.
No.
Yeah, so I agree. So it would be nice to see social drinking come back again. Maybe marijuana would make that happen? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that both counties in Suffolk are trying to
Nassau and Suffolk, you mean?
Yeah,
I
trying to preempt legalization and saying we're going to make it illegal in our counties.
Yeah, well, that's not gonna last. Sooner or later, the pressure is going to be. It's just going to be New York. It's illegal in. And they're just going to have to give in to the pressure, because eventually the federal will give in if there's 49 states, you know.
It kind of, it's weird to me, like Long Island, like we're seen as square enough already. You don't want to be like the two counties in the state that make it illegal where it's legal in the rest of the state.
Well, but you know what? Again, we're going to see. You know, I think people are have got the wrong idea, and they're going to find out when the numbers come out, when crime is higher. When all of a sudden Long Island is the crime place. Because you know, if you have pot dealers, you need to have enforcement. You know, you can't call the cops when someone steals from you. That's what organized crime is. It's just an enforcement arm of the distribution of the black market distribution network. You know, so yeah, I agree with you. That was an interesting topic. I'm glad you brought it up. So I wanted to know this studio that we're in right now, Area 22 production. So what was the story? How did you meet with them, and how did they come to become a tenant here?
Well, I think
they're definitely a tech company, right? Because they're doing streaming and they're doing.
Well,
I mean, they had the Technocrat Live. How much more techy can you get?
U-Group had an office here first, and you know, through
U-Group was first.
U-Group was first. Through Laura May. Laura May met Peter Goldsmith at some meeting or other, and then she became involved, and we had special interest groups, and she was involved in our meetings with that. And then she was one of the first tenants here. And, you know, then she kind of, when this idea came about, they just chose this space as a place.
Did she just answer an ad in the paper? I mean, how did you guys?
No, she was involved. She like met up with us.
Oh, okay.
Like when we were, you know, when we were launching this.
Yeah.
You know, like she was. You know, she was one of the first people that came and took an office. She was involved before this officially opened. Yeah.
So you knew her from your networks, from your previous ventures, like the
True ListNet.
Through ListNet.
Okay. Well, she got right away what ListNet was and what the idea of this place was. You know? Like some people got it right away.
It's a great idea. And I want to see more. I really would like to see nationwide tech cooperatives with spaces for user groups, or even just nationwide business cooperatives, even if they're not tech oriented. It's a great idea. I mean, I don't understand how places got along without this. I mean, because you know, you can, especially if it doesn't necessarily have to be tech, but whatever the interest field is, you know, having people in the different businesses be able to meet and talk to each other and maybe share resources.
So part of the problem is it goes against the norm of what like real estate people are used to. Like you go and you tell them, we're going to have a space and we're not going to have people do long-term leases. We're going to let them leave if they want. We're not going to have security deposits. But you're going to have better occupancy rates and you're going to do much better per square foot than you would your traditional model.
So you're saying, that in this case, the real estate agents are technocrats. So you're saying the technocrats are not always right.
I don't know if the real estate agents are the technocrats.
Oh, well, they are in the real estate space.
Okay, yeah.
They are the techies of the real estate space.
Right, but even the property owners don't always get it.
Freaking loans are complicated.
Right.
You know, co-op rules are complicated. Right. Condo rules are complicated. You know, dealing with the interest rates. You know, I know a lot of people are like, oh, the interest rates are simple.
Yeah.
No, they're not really.
Yeah.
You know, knowing when a high risk loan is too risky, or trying to manage properties where sales fall through and stuff.
Right.
It's a really technical field.
Right.
And they're technocrats, and it sounds like they just don't get it.
They don't get it, and the building owners don't always get it. You know, I mean, if you look around, we're in the middle of an industrial park here.
Yeah.
If you walk around or drive around after, you'll see like every other building has space for rent, 8,000 square feet,
right.
12,000 square feet, and they're empty. Why? Because
$8 million commitment, bargain.
Right.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
I don't think
so. The traditional model is, I'm going to rent this space and I'm going to rent it out to someone for 5 years, and I'm barring something happens, I'm just going to sit back and collect. I mean, it's you know.
Do you think this is tied to the shorter lifespan of employees at companies?
No, I think it's recognizing.
You know, like what I'm saying, like you get a job at GE and you work at GE for life. So because the companies have shorter relationships with their employees, is that why the real estate spaces have these vacancies? Because it must have worked at some point.
It did work
at some point. They didn't just mindlessly build this stuff. They had to.
There's a lot of things.
The numbers had to pan out at some point.
One is yes, you have shorter lifespan of that. Two is we have more entrepreneurs now. Like more people are able to start companies. And part of that is because barrier to entries are low.
And you're making it even lower.
And we're making it lower. So if you're starting a company, you don't know what space you need in 2 or 3 years, because you know you might be 2 people today and you might be 30 people in 2 years.
Or you might be 2 people.
Or you might be 2 people in 2 years. Yeah, exactly. So that's why these spaces work. You also have, we're moving away from the idea that someone has to come to a place to do their work, right? Like,
I do not understand. Please explain this.
People can work remotely. A lot of people can do their job from anywhere.
Right.
So why make them come to an office, and why do companies need to maintain the overhead for all their people if they're not, you know, it's, you know, like companies are being more flexible.
So if you have a 30-person company in a 2-person office, what happens when they show up?
Well, you don't need a 2-person office, but you might need a 15-person office instead of a 30-person. You don't need 30 desks the way you might have in the past.
Right,
you know?
right. Well, you already have them. They're at your employees' houses.
Right.
Or residents.
Right.
Right.
So that's why I say, like, things are changing overall. You know, you have distributed teams where Bill, for example, does work for a company that's in California.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, you know, it's...
They don't make him put sandals on when he logs in,
right.
so... Right.
So that's what's contributing to this space, and just... But it's the same thing, again, coming back to Uber. People held on to those taxi medallions and kept thinking, well, someone's going to come and fix this for us, and government, please fix this for me.
Right.
And it ain't going to happen. Like, it's not going to happen in real estate. It's not going to happen with the taxis. All these other things, like when you know, a system endures for a long time, but then something comes along that's a better model or disruptive to it, it will overtake that, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think there's no amount of legislating that can change that, or no amount of social engineering that can undo that.
Wait, the market's more powerful than the legislature? Be careful, people might call you a capitalist. Keep going.
Yeah. So, well, I'm a proud capitalist, but you know.
Yeah, so am I. So am I. I know I was actually saying something kind about socialism before, but I totally am a capitalist. I think socialism has problems that may be fixable. Right. But the problem is there's so few people looking seriously at the problems. Right. You know, we may be forced to go into a model where we're institutionalizing charity, because that's really what we're talking about. Whenever you're doing some kind of, you know, it's always, whether it is institutionalizing an actual charity or not, that's what it's always billed as. That's what it's sold as. Like, we're helping people. You know, but the problem is, you know, what happens. I think the key is sunsets. You know, if you want to have because economy. So really, when you're dealing with something big versus something you know, the big company, why would you want to have a gigantic company? These horrible things, everyone hates them.
Right.
You know, yes, there's some really greedy people out there, but greedy people wouldn't be able to get people to work for them necessarily.
Right.
The real problem is economy of scale.
Right.
When you build $1 million of something, it's always going to be cheaper than when you build 100,000.
Right.
And forget it if you're smart and you know what you're doing, and you're competing against people who are doing the same thing.
Well, I mean, people misunderstand capitalism sometimes too, because through capitalism, the way it's supposed to work, through competition, goods become cheaper for everyone. And the ones that succeed are the ones that can become more efficient at delivering that product at a better price. And eventually that price could go down to almost zero.
Right.
You know, which means eventually you have to move to a different thing. It means you don't have a product and can say, I could have this business model and this product forever. Capitalist means realizing that shifts.
You know, that's a very good subtle point, and I'm glad I didn't miss it and just kind of stare at you blankly. You know, that you hit a point with economy of scale where it's no longer worth doing business.
Right.
You know, and the interesting thing is that's one of the problems with intellectual property is it doesn't have a mechanism to recognize that point where you're literally selling billions of a thing.
Right.
Like imagine if aspirin was on patent.
Right.
Right? But it isn't.
Right.
And that means that many companies can make different kinds of aspirin. And it's still useful. I know there's been problems with it, but it's still used for a lot of things.
Right. So anyway, that's, you know, but that's, you know.
So in case you don't know what we're talking about with the taxi medallions, you know, New York, we kind of have these weird anomalies here because it's such a big place. You know, people were paying millions and millions of dollars, literally $3, $4, $5 million for a medallion you screw to the hood of your car. And it had to be a car. It had to have a VIN number. So what would happen is they actually had to make a rule in New York City. You're not allowed to use a commercial vehicle to be a taxi. Not allowed to use it for more than 300,000 miles. Before they made that rule, you actually saw these great classic cabs from the 50s. They would just keep fixing the 50s cars, but the problem is they were so old that some of them had 1 million miles on them. They were so old they were just constantly breaking down, and people were, you know, getting stranded in the middle of a fair. You know, and so they made a rule where it was 300,000 miles, which is way less than you can squeeze out of a Crown Vic, which was the prominent taxi when taxi medallions. And they were all Crown Vics. I mean, they were all, you know, the black cab companies all used Lincoln Town cars, and the yellow cabs were all Crown Vics. It was a sea of identical cars, and they were, you know, it wasn't so bad. But people paid millions of dollars for these taxi medallions. I remember hearing it on the news. It was a big deal, like the year before Uber started going hockey sticking. And within 5 years, bust, completely destroyed. I mean, a lot of taxi drivers killed themselves.
I know, it's tragic.
You know, they kill it. But, you know, this is the problem when, you know, they created an artificial monopoly through the government, and they literally created a situation where, you know, hardworking, determined, productive members of society had no path out except suicide to deal with the consequences.
Well, to me, it's interesting
of government meddling. You know,
it's tragic, and I don't know that there's an answer for those people. You know, the taxi drivers. Like, there's no easy fix.
Well, there's some things you can't come back from. Right.
But, you know, it's buying into a system of an artificial monopoly. When you look throughout history, it seems that those always tend to be disrupted as soon as people have the power to disrupt them. It's like you're a king.
Oh, we're out of here. Thank God we can get away from the king. Yeah.
Right. You know, and yeah, it's good while it lasts. But one day, you know, the people are going to revolt. You know?
Well, the classic, the modern society, Western society, is Gutenberg. And everybody's like, oh, Gutenberg. What was Gutenberg really about? The Reformation. What was the Reformation really about? There was a shadow government that ran the whole freaking planet, or at least the planet that people were willing to travel to on a regular basis, and that was the Catholic Church. And I'm not picking on modern Catholics. You know, they're very different now, the Catholic Church, than it was. But back then, they were tyrants. You know, they made the rules and suck it up if you don't like it. And the printing press just, as soon as that opened it up, I mean, it took like 50 years, or you know, before it was all before the dust settled. But back then, that was very, very quick. Now that's a long time, but that was very quick back then.
You have people trying to suppress internet. You still have that, like, you have those same battles going on now.
Right.
Article 13.
Yeah.
Article 13?
You're not familiar with that?
No, go ahead.
Article 13 is a law that was just passed in the European Union that basically copyrights content like through the internet that you can't use, and it prevents a lot of like access things. So like for example, if you wanted to make a meme, but the meme contained a copyrighted image,
right? That basically it's making memes illegal, right?
Wow.
Yeah. You can't reshare stuff in the.
One of the most brilliant things we have in this country is the First Amendment, which is worded in the way of saying there's no prior restraint on you saying something. Now, you might get punished for it after, but you can say it. You know, you can't be held down and forced to not, and it's brilliant. It's just the way they imagined that and the way they worded that has been such a great thing for this country.
So, so this is something that comes up a lot in freedom of speech is something that comes up a lot in tech companies, and there's been a lot of tech companies have been taking a very hard line, very not freedom-y kind of. So I don't think this is necessarily unrelated to something we were talking about before. I think this is part of this is this kind of this tendency towards Asperger's and the autistic spectrum in general, and people being in the tech field. They don't always necessarily. I've worked with a lot of people on the autistic spectrum. Nice people. They aren't mean people. But they tend to want to tend towards censorship. And I hate censorship. We just came up with this idea with our group, with our user group, instead of deplatforming people or replatforming them. And the idea is, okay, well, if you're in a situation where you just can't get along with the group, I'm just gonna send us a link and we'll send people to you. And that way, if you want to fork, if you want to make your own users group, or you want to come up with your own rules, then we encourage you to do that. Even if we disagree with you, even if we can't get along, there's no reason that we have to try to stop you. And the reason that that's important is because people people have invest a lot in a network. Like if you're in Facebook, how many hours? Facebook it tends to attract an older crowd. I'm sure they hate that image. But they do tend to attract an older crowd. Or I mean, even if you want to talk to Instagram or whatever that new one is, one of the more visual ones. When they bring people in and they block people from. When they disapprove of something that someone said and they block them from interacting with the people in their network, they're basically denying them. They're asset seizuring the currency, the social currency that they put and the time that they put into networking with people there. This is one of the reasons. Like I know a lot of people on Facebook that I just haven't bothered to friend. Thanks for friending me, by the way. But don't take it personal. If you know me and I'm on Facebook and I haven't asked you for a friend request, it's because I don't want to invest any energy into that because that's not my currency. That's in their bank with their rules and I can't touch it. So I don't want to put too much into that currency. And this idea of this kind of abstract idea of currencies having value, of your time socializing with other people having value, seems to be something sensibly that seems to escape people on the spectrum. I don't know if it's just people on the spectrum. I'm not just picking on them. Maybe it's some other social mechanism within these companies, but it just seems to be a glaring significance. I've had arguments with people about mailing lists and web forums and just any time when people are interacting on a potentially hot topic. I've seen admins just run in there, censorship blazing, and it's like, what country are you from? What century are you from? Don't you want to give them some kind of options and give them opportunities and chances to not blow it? Here's how you can do it right. Give them advice. Why is that? Why do people?
I don't know. I mean,
is it like a corporate culture thing? Is it a personality thing?
I don't know. I think we have a culture that people feel they have the right to not be offended, when you really don't have the right to not be offended. I mean,
sometimes you need to be offended.
Part of believing in free speech only works if you're willing to allow the speech you disagree with.
That offends me.
I know.
Keep going. I'm kidding. I mean, nothing offends me.
Everybody's willing to allow free speech in the speech they agree with. Like we would have no problem with that.
Well, yeah.
Like that's the whole point of free speech, is so that everyone gets
criticism.
Is criticism.
Well, you know why that is? It's because people learn by making mistakes.
Right.
This is what we were saying before about businesses.
Right.
You can tell someone who's a business virgin if they think if just making a couple of mistakes means that you're done in the business world.
Right.
You're not even getting started. You're just starting to put feelers out there and try to figure out what's going on.
Right.
People become bigger and better from making mistakes, and maybe whoever it is inside these tech companies don't seem to get that. Now, I could be totally unduly picking on the the technocrats working in these companies, and it could be the technocrats at the top, or not even technocrats at all, just these socially clueless people steering the ship into icebergs constantly because they think it's funny.
Right.
But why? 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 You don't know, huh?
I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, it has to stop.
But I mean, it's there is some use to that stuff. I mean, we just launched a group in Facebook called Listen at Tech Talk as kind of a way for people in the Long Island community in general to ask our members tech questions, post jobs, things like that. And it was inspired by things like there's a Plainview Moms group, and it's huge. And if they slam a restaurant or something like that, some restaurant had bugs in it or something, stuff happens right away. So these can be a means of grassroots things.
That speech offends me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, keep going.
These groups can grow and have influence that's outside the traditional spheres of influence.
Right.
I do agree. There is concern about Facebook, Twitter, and their rules and their things. And one day they just decide, hey, we don't like you anymore. Goodbye.
Right. But and I think I think at some level that currency has property value. I mean, in the law enforcement world, there was just a big courtroom in the Supreme Court against civil forfeiture.
Right.
You have to actually have a reason to do it. You can't just do it. How is this different?
As a capitalist, I believe that Twitter should be able to censor whoever they want, right? Just as a capitalist.
Right.
But then if you think, well, to the extent that Twitter has a monopoly on being Twitter, right? Has it now gone beyond just a regular business?
Right.
Gab.
Gab? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I have a Gab account. Well, so this is one of the things that they're also doing. Sometimes they're not so earnest about it. They're not right in your face.
Right.
I have a Gab account that I started about a year after my Twitter account.
Right.
And I had the Twitter account forever, and I just never touched it.
Right.
So they roughly developed in the same trajectory.
Right.
My Gab account is an order of magnitude bigger than my Twitter account. Why is that? And it's funny. And actually, even this show has very abysmal numbers. I re-put them back up on YouTube, and so I have an archive of the show. There's definitely interesting topics in the show. This is a little more out there. But, I mean, this is deep technical topics and things that people may want to learn about or may be interested in people's opinions about. And the numbers are wrong there. They are absolutely wrong. I've talked to people. I've literally talked to more physical people who have watched a video than I have numbers for a particular video on the website.
Right.
They're lying.
Right.
I mean, and I understand. Now, so they're going out there and saying, "Oh, it's bots."
Right.
But it's not bots. Nobody knows who I am.
Right.
Hopefully, that's changing.
Right.
But because I think the show is great and it's a good opportunity for people to get out there and teach people about what they know about the technical world. But I have definitely been shadow banned. So they're not only are they seizing my assets, but they're not telling me about it. Like I have an account over in BitChute, so I have an order of magnitude bigger hit, bigger followers on Gab than I do on Twitter, posting the same stuff.
Right.
Reposts are different because I get different posts coming in.
Right.
But the same post, I'll always post almost always post the same exact thing on both places.
But to what extent? Do you think that's because there's
Well, I mean, it could just be a flaw in their algorithm.
No,
they could just be bad at computers.
No, but you.
You don't want to call YouTube bad at computers?
No. So how can I put this? There's people make rules, right?
Right.
Organizations, Twitter, companies, and then there's people that will try to work the system, so to speak, like game the system.
Right.
And there's many people that are willing to game Twitter.
Okay, yeah.
But like, I don't have the time or patience to game Twitter or Facebook, and I don't know that you are a person that would try to game it, so to speak, either.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
I wouldn't.
buy followers or have like people randomly click. This. So.
And if I did, I wouldn't admit it.
So, right, that offends me.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
You have Twitter where you need to like actually be like recognized to get followers, and it's really hard. You need to know your audience.
They completely, for sure, there are documented cases where they were abusing the blue check mark. And it was funny. There was a Joe Rogan where they had originally they had the president of Twitter on there, and Joe Rogan was just having a conversation like this. And Joe's not like a super tech. Like we're both definitely techies. He's not a techie. He's also other things too. So he just didn't know what questions to ask, and people beat him up about that. So then he comes back on, and he's got an Uber techie. He's got this guy. I forgot his name. I gotta forget his name. Anyway, I follow him on. And they got an Uber techie, and they bring their tech/lawyer for Twitter, and they have it out, and they're just rattling through the documented cases of Twitter doing different abuses, and one of them is the check mark. Yeah, Tim Pool, that's it. Thank you. Documenting the cases of them abusing the blue check mark. They were using it as originally it was just to verify a person was who they said they were, and they were using that up until about 2015, and then it started to morph. And now it's just we approve of what you say. Which is like what? I wouldn't want it. I would if I had a blue check mark, I'd remove it.
See, here's where
it's a badge of shame.
Here's what I find interesting, because this is where they could get themselves in trouble. Because you start out and you say, I'm a channel for people communicating, and I'm not responsible if someone says something that's illegal. But now, if you're policing it, aren't you now responsible? Now, haven't you? I'm not a lawyer.
That was a YouTube comment thing. The comment policy that they went and then they changed back because they were like, everyone's like, that's crazy.
But that's I'm not a lawyer. It's not legal advice. But again, you
can't ask someone to do something legally that's prohibitively expensive to the tune of like more money than you have in the world. I want $30 billion. That's more money than there is in the entire world. That's how much it would cost to police the comments on Twitter. I mean, on YouTube.
But they're trying to. They're sort of like half policing. So like Twitter. I guess if people were snarkily replying "learn to code," and that was like a marked phrase that if people replied that, they got banned. And it's like
that was the worst. That was the dumbest.
It's like
learn to code, people. Really, Well, actually, the anger about that defends the point that I was trying to make. But we don't know who's right. And you can't kill debate like that because this is an important question. We're probably gonna have to go to a tax structure where we're gonna have to subsidize some people if we don't sort this out. I mean, we're not just talking millions here. We're talking trillions. If figuring out whether learn to code is fair or not is a $1 trillion question. Why the hell are they censoring it? Because most people can't reach beyond sound bites. They pick a side. They fight it out, and I think that's good for society. When people come to the table and everybody argues about it, and you come and you don't always get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong, but you come to a conclusion. You say, okay, let's try this. And you try it for a while, and it's broken or it works. And then if it's broken, you try something else again.
Well, I mean,
and you come back to the table.
The interesting question is like, social media has become the public square. But it's on a bigger scale. And it's dominated by the people that already dominate it. So what's the alternative?
Well, it wasn't like that for a while. I think that's what that's the PewDiePie is the interesting question. Why do they hate him so much? I think he's kind of I don't know. Sorry, I think he's kind of boring. But I think it's my age. I think it's my age. Like I'm just like there's too many sound bites and blips and clever little. It's almost like a cartoon. And I want to watch a cartoon or a talk show. I don't want to watch both. But a lot of people like that.
Right.
And, you know, I think you're right. I think Steve's right. It's just because he's popular.
I used to watch him.
And he was nobody before that.
Right.
Well, I used to watch him when I was a kid. Like, he used to be like a video game kind of player. But now he's more focused. Like, a lot of people follow him because of his rise to fame. And his rise to fame, he kind of talks in his videos about, like, what he's experiencing and his interactions with companies. And,
it's autobiographical.
Yeah, so, like, because he's the biggest YouTuber, objectively, right now. Going head-to-head with this Indian corporation. But, like, because of that, he's going to all these, like, issues, fighting media, fighting Wall Street Journal head-on, getting his stuff canceled.
I remember them calling him a Nazi, and it's because he was reviewing a game with Nazis in it. There's Nazis in the game. Beat up the game company. He's reviewing it, you jerks.
So between all that, like, people follow him because they're interested in seeing, like, what he's going through. Because despite him being the biggest, he's one of the most humble and soft-spoken people, like, regardless.
Right, right.
So that's, like, kind of what attracts the fan base.
Thank you so much for chiming in on that, because I'm like, I don't know, he's big. People like him.
Yeah.
You know, and but it's crazy. It's not just him. There's a lot of really people who maybe might not have had a voice, or might not have been that popular, or didn't come up through political channels, or weren't like celebrities on television, that are now famous through the internet. The internet fame, honestly, I think the internet fame is the only fame that counts anymore. You know, and I think it seems to scare some people, and I'm very suspicious of the people it scares, because why would that scare you?
Right.
You know, if anything, you know, it just gives you an opportunity to find out what people really want, unless you don't really care what people really want.
Right.
How's that for a rant? I don't even know. How long have we been going at this? Oh, we're hour and a half. Okay, we're good.
We're good. We're good.
We're good. We haven't run over. All right, well, yeah, I didn't know you felt so strongly about this, and I'm really glad that I got a chance to talk to you about it.
I mean, free speech is one of the most essential things, and without that, you just, you know.
So here, I'm gonna throw something at you that might throw you for a loop with that.
Okay.
So, Transparent Society, David Brin, cameras everywhere.
Right.
You know, do we have a right to privacy or not? What do you think? That's the other side of the free speech coin, right?
Right.
You know, can everybody just record everybody all the time? And could we even stop it by, putting government regulations to change behavior?
So let's start with first, I don't think we can stop it. You know, like, cameras are just everywhere, drones will be everywhere, and it'll be the same thing. You could try to legislate against it, right? But you won't. It'll be, there'll be camera zones, drones everywhere in a few years.
So that's 7-0 people. That we've had 7 technocrats on here, and none of them think you can stop it.
I don't think you can.
I don't think you can.
How could you?
Make it 8. Yeah, I don't think you can stop it.
And
a lot of people are like, you can stop it. You can't stop it. You're being silly. You're being a silly. Stop being silly.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, be silly, not about that,
I mean,
You have these in your pocket.
Right.
You have phones in your pocket that are listening. I mean,
you have a supercomputer / recording studio in your pocket.
People can talk about the Alexa and the Google thing, but like they've been able to listen to your phone remotely for years,
Right.
Officially and unofficially. So, the minute everyone had a cell phone, you already had a device that was capable of listening.
So you think so freedom of speech applies to invasion of privacy too, I guess?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think within your house, like, you should have some privacy. Like, if,
Have you watched the show? You have watched the show.
Yeah.
That's Okay, so you agree with it on that? Yeah, I think property rights are where you can draw
within your property,
And it's important to note as a caveat to that that the only way that works is if people have at least a good opportunity for property rights. Like, more things are treated like property, so that you can have
the interesting question
privacy
is
that goes
the
along with
space above your property. Like, can a drone fly above? Can you shoot that drone down if it's above your property?
Did you? So there is a little bit of law on this.
Yeah.
Do you know about the law? There was a case of a farmer in Plains.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He shot a drone down.
Oh, no. This is way before drones. So originally when airplanes first came around, so there was a law where actually a farmer sued an airline company because they're flying planes over his property. It was a big farm. And it was a flight path. And he's like, no, you can't do that. It's my property. You can't fly over it. So it said the way the law was written is it actually said to the heavens. So they decided that the heavens started 1,000 feet up. And that's how they resolved it legally. So that allowed the planes to fly over his property, and you couldn't sue them anymore. So, it's really just a matter of moving where the heavens start.
Yeah, I mean, drones will be able to zoom from 1,000 feet up anyway.
Right. Yeah, drones is just a standard arms race, I think.
Right.
You know, technically, yeah, you can't really fly it over someone's private property.
Right.
But at the same time, you know, if you build a drone and you make it untraceable, which is relatively easy,
right?
You just leave it. All right, I got caught. I'll send another one up tomorrow.
But again, how could you police it? I mean, you can't police it. Yeah, you can't police it. So it's I don't know. I mean, so yes, I do believe in a right to privacy and all that, but we have to deal with the reality of how do we deal with this? How do we, and like I found it interesting.
I think we have a right to mechs.
Right.
To 30-foot, war mechs. So I should be able to, travel anywhere I want in my 30-foot war mech.
Right.
What? That's weird? I think war mechs, man. Anyway.
I had, when I had my IT company, had young people working for me, and they were a lot more cavalier about posting stuff on Facebook. And I was like, aren't you worried that like some future employer is going to see you doing this and that? And their attitude was generally, well, screw them. Like if they have a problem with me drinking a beer or doing whatever, and I don't care.
So that's the good thing.
Right.
That's the good thing about what's happening now with society.
Right.
And I think and it's kind of weird that when you're against freedom of speech, it's almost like you're trying to stop this.
Right.
But that people are just becoming more accepting in general. But not the tech companies specifically.
Right.
But people in general are becoming more accepting of it.
But you got plenty of old guard people there that do care.
Right.
Like I never cared if I saw shit
would never not hire someone because of an embarrassing drunk pic.
You wouldn't, but there's plenty of companies that wouldn't. And then and then I talked to HR people that said I would never look at someone's Facebook, and I'm like, okay, and legally, you can't. But I would never not hire someone for what's there either.
Well, also that those HR companies, those HR departments are going to be limited.
Right.
They're going at some point they're going to become liable. Right. Right. Because whatever standard practice is what they're going to be expected to do. Right. And most HR departments, I guess companies sometimes too. Right. Most HR organizations do look at social media now because they have to, because everyone else does. Right. So. Yeah, we just gotta get over it. Yeah. Like it's okay to mess up sometimes. Sometimes, I've had some of the things that I hope make me ethical are dumb, embarrassing things I've done and I felt bad about. And I was like, yeah, this was wrong. Right. I had an embarrassing thing. I'm always very careful to not take sides in I'll tell an embarrassing story. Okay. You know what, I'm going to back off from the really embarrassing one, just go to the kind of embarrassing one. So I'm driving on Ocean Parkway and I come up Wanta Parkway and there's a fire and there's all kinds of cars stopped and the police aren't there yet. Right. And there's the fire actually turns out to be a motorcycle. It had rolled down a hill and it landed by the water. It was flaming and it looked like it was going to explode any second. And there's a guy and he's just got blood covered all over him. So I'm like, oh my God, I got to help this guy. So I run back to my car and I grab some paper towels just so we can clean up a little bit. I'm like, I don't have any real medical gear, but at least this will help you so you can stop dripping everywhere. You can hold them and maybe they'll stop bleeding. And that was all I could do, so I left. I wanted to get out of the way before the police showed up. And as I'm walking away, I realized that he has slid his motorcycle. He went down on his motorcycle, he did a low side, and he slid into a family riding bicycles and clipped them, and they had been all knocked off their bicycles and were laying on the concrete. Wow. But I didn't even notice them at first. Wow. So I was like, dang, I'm so sorry, I hope you feel better. Right. And I wonder, like, if I think they were still conscious. Wow. I just completely ignored them, and I didn't realize they were there until I got it. I think because there was a crowd around them, I couldn't see them. Right. But I was really embarrassed about it. I'm like, next time I have to look at the whole scene and realize what's going on before, basically forgiving this guy, because I just thought he just crashed his bike and no harm, no foul, right? Actually he took a family of bicyclists out. So, who knows, he could have just been an accident. It could have just been he hit some sand. I did that once. Or he could have been riding at 150 miles an hour and was being reckless and now it really cost someone. So, yeah, I mean, that was an example of something where I didn't specifically do anything wrong. I didn't have the information, but I just had to be more careful. Things like that shape who I am. And that's how everybody works. That's how human beings work. And if you can't let people make mistakes, they're never going to be better. And we're just going to be just as people just running around criticizing each other all the time without any real
like internet mobs have wrongly identified people many times and tried to enact justice on
I hope they feel guilty about it.
Yeah, I hope they do.
And you know what? I forgive them.
Yeah.
Don't do it again, though. Learn from it. Yeah, right? I think people are, because they're seeing, all right, well, there's some people who are just as bad as ever, but definitely there's people out there who have learned from being part of an internet mob and went, that didn't work out so well. Maybe I'll be more calm next time. It's a little both. There's plenty of trolls. I'm not saying internet trolls are gone. That's an insane statement.
No.
But, you know.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it's...
Yeah, so don't worry, you don't have to share an embarrassing story too. I've thought long and hard about what stories I'm willing to share. There's a few I won't ever. You know, what was that Odin said? That thing Odin said? When you share your last secret, that's when you die. Yeah. So I think he's probably right about that.
But you know, a lot of people growing up now, a lot of their embarrassing shit is captured on video, you know, like I'm glad there was no Facebook when I was in college, because all this stuff would be out there.
I did some stuff that I feel bad for my kids. My kids are really good. Now I wonder is it because my wife is giving them superior genetics and they're behaving better, or is it because they recognize that some stuff never goes away? I warned them, like some stuff you're going to do is never going to go away. I've been warning them since they were little, so I guess maybe I can't tell if they got it, or if society's different and that helped them get it, or if they're just different people.
Well, I think society will evolve as more of this stuff is out there. Like, if everyone's dirty laundry all of a sudden became out in the open overnight, we'd all become a lot more tolerant of each other. You know?
So I wanted to ask you about like workspace.
Sure.
Like you know, finding your piece. I know you do some programming. And I know you do some training and learning, and you got to do business stuff. So I've worked in cubicle farms, and it's freaking awful. Fortunately, I have heavy metal, so it's a great sound shield, especially if you did heavy metal plus noise canceling headphones. Really, someone has to tap you. You're gone. You're not, you know. But not everybody has that. Most music is not like that. Noise canceling headphones only do so much. And plus, you have the visual spectrum too, where you can see other people. What do you think about offices versus cubicles versus teleconferencing? You know, versus all the flaws with any kind of remote software, which is clearly the internet is littered with videos with people with buggy Skype sessions. So, phasing in and out.
So I'll start by saying there's no right answer for everyone. You know, everyone has. I'll tell you what mine is, but you know,
I'm offended by that.
Well, there's definitely not a right answer for you.
But there's no right answer for me.
I will take the opportunity to do a plug and say we have a lovely office available here, a small office with windows in the Digital Ballpark.
Nice segue.
They don't last open for long. When I first started with my business, I worked at home, and in one hand, it was nice to work at home, but I think for me, I was happier not working at home, because when I was working at home, I felt there was no balance between work life and like life. You know, I was just always there. Plus, you know, you start to be undisciplined. You wake up late. You start watching shows. You goof around a little more because you say, I'm just here, whatever. And like what would be, you know, I don't know, a 10-hour day, you know, would turn into like a 14-hour day, out of which you'd get like 5 or 6 hours worth of work done because you goofed around and did stuff. And so I liked when I went to an office and was in an environment like that. Now, I have 2 offices here, and I kind of like that because I have my ListNet office where I'm there and I'm doing my ListNet stuff, and then I have another office that I do pay for through my company, so I go and do my company stuff, and you know.
Oh, okay. Well, I knew you had 2 offices, but I didn't know why.
Yeah, that's why, because I mean, it just. Part of it is mentally that I'm in this frame of mind and I'm here, and then like change of perspective helps a lot sometimes. You know? So plus I have all my ListNet stuff in one office and all my other stuff in my own office. You know, But generally, I like quiet. I've never been like one to like have music while I work, though I do.
It took some practice to listen to people screaming in my ear at the top of their lungs with the authentic fury, and to ignore it and to do work. But eventually, I got there.
What I did, like I don't know, possibly I'm on the spectrum as well, because like noise sometimes bothers me.
That's fine.
But like if
you just have ears.
Or I just have ears. But like, if my wife's at home like watching TV and I'm trying to work, I'll sometimes listen to white noise. And that actually I find works for me. Like I'll put on just a internet white noise station and listen to that.
I mean, just kind of joking about being in the spectrum, I found that my personality changes depending on what kind of work I'm doing.
Yeah.
If I'm doing kind of businessy work, I tend to be more social. Outgoing. I'm actually an introvert. I know it's hard to believe, but I really am. And then but if I'm working on code, especially if I'm working for a few days, I mentioned in a different one, I even had, my mind even starts playing music in the background. It starts playing Neil Diamond.
Do you start drinking more coffee
That's my fizzle fry music. It just goes, and I'm gone. I'm like, the sun could go down and come back up, and I don't even know what's going on.
Yeah, you get into like a trance when you're working on
You definitely get into a trance, and I'm a different person when I'm in that trance.
I consume more caffeine when I'm coding and stuff like that.
Really?
Like I start,
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost like if you were able to phase shift yourself into a different personality, that would be an advantage, assuming that you could manage that and it wouldn't just sneak up on you and happen at random times.
But I mean, I like a space like this, and obviously I'm biased for the collaborative aspect. Like I have someone that works with me. These days, I'm more doing the analysis and design of application, and someone's programming. And the fact that we're physically in the same spot, this is someone I worked together with before, and now he has the office next to me. So to me, that's of tremendous value. There's no, I think that in-person has a different kind of experience than you can never capture with video.
I completely agree with you. Whenever I needed to get something done at work and involved interfacing with other people, I found I had to be near them.
Yeah.
I mean, I just maybe you can tell from the show, and then I'm not doing remote interviews.
Right.
That's so much cheaper and easier to do.
Right.
But I think it's inferior.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much bandwidth between us right now. I can read you, I can see, I can feel out. Are you comfortable with these questions? Are you having a good time? Are we in the flow? But that matters in a meeting. That matters when you're trying to change someone's work direction. Probably more than here. Because they put their heart and soul into something, and you're like, that's going to screw the company or cost too much or not be what the customer asked for or 1,000 other things.
But I feel the same, and not everyone agrees with me. Like when I have customers, my preference is to meet with them in person. Yeah. I feel I get to know them, they get to know me. It sets up a better relationship.
I can say, not anecdotally, definitively, from my own experience, it works better. Sales teams that show up in person sell stuff. People who try to do it over the phone,
well, I mean, you have certain people that have products that they're selling a lot, high volume, small price. They can't.
That's different.
But
the customer is half sold when you get on the phone. Yeah.
But I always find, and it just starts the relationship off better versus this is some voice on the end of the phone. Is he a jerk? Is he not? I don't know, but
I am really a potato. Right? It's just an AI on a potato, and then you don't know. I mean, you don't know who it is, and you can't see the look on their face, and you can't tell if they're like the Wolf of Wall Street, punching their friend in the arm. Look, I got this idiot. I got him.
So that's why I like this, and I like the collaborative energy. I like the just coming in and seeing other people here. It's just exciting. It's being around.
So that office that you have available, are they low cost? Or are they,
this one's fairly low cost.
So it's a lower kind of cost of entry, a lower barrier to entry, and they have the advantage of having the community.
You have the community.
There's a bunch of different. It's not just our user group. There's a whole bunch of user groups.
User groups here. We have a WordPress user group here. We BYOG. Bring your own guitar on the first Friday of the month.
Nice.
That's right. We do other events here. We do something called Tech Showcase. Every quarter we take about 3 ListNet member companies and have them do a short pitch about what they do. Not for the sake of fundraising, just for the sake of, hey, this is what I do. Maybe you know someone that can help me. Maybe you can help me. Maybe you can make a connection.
Right.
So, and again, these are all things that contribute to creating an ecosystem.
Part of it is that. Part of it is not you just. I mean, I've known uber mega geeks that can answer most questions. I've never met anyone who can answer all questions. You know, and it's funny watching someone who's used to answering almost every question when they can't answer something, they don't know what to do. They're like, I don't know, you know. And but that's sometimes it's just about knowing who to ask.
I am technical also, because a lot of people watching don't know that I'm technical, but I have a master's in computer science from Hofstra, and I've programmed and done all that.
And Hofstra's not the bottom barrel.
No,
it can be. I actually went to a semester there.
So you know, I do have the tech side also, but these days I'm working more on the analytic promotion side and all that. And a lot of times people go to me, "Wow, I never knew you could code," and you know, I found it to be, even though I'm not always the guy doing the code anymore, I've found it to be a tremendous advantage in working with programmers because I can relate.
You understand the process, too.
I understand the process,
Right. I mean, I had a guy, a manager once at one of my companies, and he was a construction manager before that. He didn't have a clue. He didn't have a clue. He was screwed. You know, I mean, it was during the dot-com days, so they were hiring anybody.
I mean,
they didn't want to waste a tech on a management position, but that was a terrible mistake. They really needed to waste a tech on that because he didn't understand what the hell he was doing.
Well, I've found a lot of times, you know, a lot of my consulting, I end up being the guy in between the programmers and the boss, owner, non-technical person. So I'm kind of the and a lot of times, like, people will get mad at programmers or think programmers are lazy or this or that. In my experience, it's rare that programmers are lazy or malicious, you know. Now, occasionally you do get
hold on a second. I sorry to interrupt you. I like to let you talk, but I think it's a question of malicious laziness, or enlightened laziness, right? Because
I agree. I agree.
Programmers they do well when they're lazy, Because I'll let the computer do that. If you do that enough, everything is just happening like this for you.
But I mean, I think when people say lazy in terms of programmers, they feel that the programmers are not putting in enough work. And in my experience, programmers are usually putting in more hours than they're, you know, they're expected, I've yet to meet a programmer that has not done that at least once, you know. So, you know, but understanding programmers and understanding that, you know, it usually turns out that the expectations don't sync up between programmers and the people requesting the work, you know.
Well, there's a moxie aspect to that too with programmers, where you're just like, well, I don't know this, but I should know this. So I'm going to take whatever time I need to take to learn it, so I don't have to tell them I can't figure this out.
Well, that's where you can come in as a good manager.
Right? You know,
yes and no. You can, you know, because I've been in that case with people and said, look, I mean, you know, take this amount of time. I understand that, but the client doesn't want to pay for 2 days, and we don't want to eat 2 days of you doing that. So go nuts for 4 hours. And if I can't build a client, I won't build a client. But you know, you'll fulfill your curiosity, and then let's find another solution. You know, it's because. You know, again.
Well, it's important to make that distinction. That's it's a good point. And it's important to make that distinction, because what ends up happening is the programmer then is faced with kind of a prisoner's dilemma. And I'm like, what do I invest my time in? Do I invest my time looking for a library or another program that does this already? Or a function where it's all, you know, I can just call it and just send it 2 parameters and it gives me the answer. Or do I write it? You know, and like if you pick the wrong one, like you know, you want them to write it if it's quick. You know. But at the same time, you don't want to have a program that's riddled with other people's libraries that has a billion dependencies, because it makes your life more difficult.
And you got to balance it with like ultimately someone's paying for it. Like that's putting
that manager I was talking about would not have understood that trade-off.
So you got to balance all the needs. It's like it's a resource management issue of, like, you know. You know, someone's paying for it. You got the programmer, but ultimately you want the programmer to be better. So you got to let him or her spend some time improving. You know? So.
Agreed.
And it varies by project. The best programmer I hired now works for Apple. He makes a lot of money, and at Apple, they get things right, and they could put the time and money into getting things 100% perfect.
Theoretically, you could keep escalating until you're sitting in the room with Tim Cook, and you're like, "This is the most important thing we're doing right now," and he'll go, "Yes." That could happen,
but
you know?
Most companies don't have that kind of budget, so you gotta. It's an engineering issue. Like, how do we optimize the time and resources we have to make a solution?
And then you have to go back to the customer and be like, "We're making a compromise." You could have this compromise or this compromise. What do you want to lose? in your requirements.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, it's not just, this isn't just willy-nilly.
Right.
I mean, you know, Apple will spend billions on making a better interface.
Right.
You know, they could have $1 billion effort, and the result is a few buttons move around.
Right.
You know, but how many? When you multiply that times 100 million people,
right?
How much time did that save?
Right.
You know, it was worth $1 billion.
Right. It was worth $1 billion.
But you don't have $1 billion.
But it's their brand also. That's why they're Apple. That's because it's polished. You know.
Right. Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, this is where open source has problems sometimes with the polish.
Right.
You know, you can't necessarily solve the $1 billion problem. You got to come up with a $100,000 solution to the problem.
No, but there can be in betweens. Like I was a big fan of Ubuntu because what they did is they prettified Linux for users. You know, they created like a polished desktop.
Right.
You know, when they first came out.
Yeah, for sure.
And there were versions before that, like Midas.
They were based on Debian. At the time, Debian was a train wreck.
Right.
I mean, it was like every little piece worked great, and you put it together as a package, and it was daunting.
Right.
You know, like for a computer geek who was a professional admin, it was actually good to do because it was a learning experience.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to learn about all these packages and all these programs and all these servers. And 3 days later, you'll learn about all of them, and now you can do a Debian install. If you're just a user, you're like, what the f is this shit? I don't want to do all this.
Right.
I have other things to do.
Right.
Whereas Apple spent $1 billion and solved that problem. Ubuntu spent $100,000 and solved the same problem and found an in-the-middle solution. And I think a lot of in-the-middle solutions are going to be the future.
And wasn't it amazing that Microsoft lets people run Linux native within Windows, and Ubuntu was the first one there?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about like what had to happen in the world for that to be the reality we live in, it's, you know, it's amazing.
Microsoft was extremely hostile to open source in general, and it wasn't just like, oh, we don't like those people or that we arbitrarily
destroy them.
It was philosophical from the beginning of Microsoft. Bill Gates, right at the beginning of Microsoft, said, why should programmers not be paid?
Right.
You know, he just didn't get it. Like, why would you not? And the answer, of course, is, I mean, I don't know. I think the answer is because sometimes it's more important to have a well-understood shared infrastructure than it is to have a clear compensation avenue.
Right.
I mean, you just can't make everything, you know, paywalled.
Right.
Because sometimes there's different pieces that need to work together, and if they're all paywalled, everyone does this.
Right.
As to who's responsible for it. If it's all open source, anyone can fix it.
Right. I mean, it's interesting because Microsoft was disruptive of IBM in the beginning, right? IBM had OS2, which was like, we're going to do everything the right way. And there was
I saw a documentary on them. So Bill Gates was saying something like, yeah, we got to keep riding the bull. Just keep riding the bull about IBM. And they wouldn't do anything to piss IBM off for like the first 6 or 7 years. And then they went, okay, now let's break loose.
They built Windows kind of like in secret.
And that was around the OS2 days.
Yeah. And you know, you read about it, and like the Windows programmers were naming, you know, functions after people's they knew initials and stuff like that, and IBM was doing everything the proper way. And look at what won. I mean, you could make all the argument you want about the right way and you know this, but sometimes the chaotic way wins because it gets done. You know.
Right. Whatever it is you needed to do in Microsoft. So it's funny. You can see their design philosophy in Microsoft Sync in cars. So I have a 2014 van, but it has a very old version of Sync.
Okay.
So comparing that was Sync 1 to Sync 2 and Sync 3. Sync 1 is very Microsoft. Like if you're familiar with how they used to write there, it's got a million little twists and turns. You could just keep going down into menus and finding little things and like, oh, they thought of this. Oh, they thought of this. Because they would just, I don't know if it was the way their programmers thought or if it was the structure within Microsoft itself. They would say, okay, here's the main thing. That's the main team in charge of the main interface. You guys are in charge of the sub interface. You guys are in charge of the sub interface. You guys are in charge of this sub interface. And like everyone would think of things the other team didn't. So you really like you had to sit there and go. And just experiment and try each checkbox. But you could do anything with it. It was really flexible. So of course, what happened? Normal users hated it. Like, this is too complicated. I don't understand it. Because somebody would their kid would check a box in the 5th menu, and they wouldn't be able to find it because they didn't want to sit down and look at everything. So you know, it was very. That was their design philosophy, and it was. You could usually get it done. within. It's weird hearing the Linux guy talk so lovingly about the Microsoft
Well,
maze.
now, like, C# is now cross-platform for real, and their new model, ASP, whatever the new version of ASP is like, runs on Linux, and you could just build a C# application and run it on Linux, and they're okay with it.
Yeah, it's really good. They've changed a lot, and I hope they stay that way.
Yeah.
But I have to be ready.
Of course.
You know, they could go evil any second.
Yeah.
They are gigantic, so you can see it.
Well, there's forces. I mean, it's you know, they're working within the system. Look, Linux didn't end up in Windows without there being market reason for it to happen, right? Without developers, you know, choosing Apple laptops because that's what their companies would allow because they had a Unix command line in it. So, but again, they responded to it, and it's, you know, I think it's been good for them, you know.
So I wanted to talk to you about kind of like user groups in general. So you have several user groups.
Right.
You know, there's not a lot of people who are like business leaders that I could talk to that are also multi-user group.
Okay.
You know, user groups do frequently share members.
Right.
But so, you know, I just see a trend, and I don't know if this is something that like you see too or you disagree with, where user groups tend to like be almost like fraternities or guilds of old. You know, like the Masons, or like we were joking about a group called the Beavers before, or like a good example like Island Labs, which is a local makerspace, is meeting at a Moose Lodge. You know, I would never have thought that would. I was really skeptical. I was actually there when it was proposed. I just happened to be at a meeting. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound right. I didn't say anything. You know, it's not my group, but. It worked. Apparently, they're you know, it worked well enough that they're getting along, and you know, it kind of reminded me of Revenge of the Nerds, in that scene where they basically pledged to the one fraternity that wouldn't reject them, and they changed that fraternity. Sure, the fraternity changed them, but they also changed the fraternity and became the geek wing of that fraternity. Is this happening? Are we merging into? Are we creating new guilds here, or is this just a flash in the pan and not going to have any long-term impact?
No, I think it has impact. So,
like you know, for a kind of a tradition of training and well, I think social belonging, also training and belonging, but also I think for change. You know, and I'll give you a good example. ListNet's been around for. Sorry, it's really vague. Go for it. Yeah.
ListNet's been around for 22 years, you know? And one of the things I always heard from people, we have a CEO group, is you know, these kids graduate from schools and they don't have the skills we want to hire them. You know, so we created with Hofstra an advisory panel where people that are ListNet members meet with them twice a year and kind of just give them feedback on their program, on their computer science program.
Very smart of Hofstra.
Yes, and you know, other schools have done similar things. Another good example is Hunter Business School. They do like a 7.5-month web application training program, and they came to us and said, at the end, these students do a 6-week unpaid internship. Can you bring us some companies? So sure, I got companies here. I got other companies in ListNet. We made some connections, and some people got hired.
So what you say, you show up in a trench coat, I got companies. You want some companies?
Well, what?
Hey, remember those guys in New York? Whatever you needed. I need an umbrella. There's an umbrella guy with a trench coat.
What I'm saying is that the group, and we're basically the 501c6, so we're a chamber of commerce, a member support organization. Through having a group, it becomes easier to communicate with a group of people that have the same interests or shared interests versus trying to communicate with all these people directly. Like, imagine Hofstra trying to, on its own, reach out to all these companies on Long Island and get them to do that. Maybe they'd hit a couple of them. But
I'm constantly blown away by the number of tech companies. I mean, like, I know a lot of geeks and a lot of companies, and every day I talk to someone, I find out about a new one.
And we don't even have all of them, but I have a concentration of them. And that's the thing, where you get a concentration of people with the same interests. You know, another thing I took part of with there's a group called Vision Long Island that promotes smart downtowns on Long Island, you know, smart growth of mixed-use retail and apartments, and they've been successful in getting Long Island towns that have been,
which is another way to cut costs,
violently opposed to apartments, to allow apartments and things like that. They're part of another group called the Long Island Lobby Coalition. And I went with them up to Albany. And what they do, they have different groups on Long Island, and they come up with an agenda of only items that everyone in the group can agree with. You know, and then they go and lobby that. And
so they're just forming a consensus.
They're just forming a consensus. But it's of different constituencies of people that have concentration. So there's an environmental group, there's people from labor unions, you know.
I like the consensus commons model.
Yeah.
See, there's something magical. So a lot of people are like, it wasn't the folks in the studio here, but also just everybody. When I told them what I wanted to do, they're like, 3 hours? Are you on drugs? There's something magical. Maybe. No. There's something magical about the second hour. I don't know what it is, but the stuff that comes up. I mean, you know, that consensus model is great. I mean, I'm not saying you realize it, but for some reason the conversation, it just...
No, it is great, and the problem is
Says you got wine and you loosen them up.
Wine, yeah.
The secret is wine.
The 3 ounces of wine.
Drink enough.
And this potent decaf Dunkin' Donuts coffee here. No, I mean, the focus is often on the Discord, right? Because that's what sells, right? The media wants to highlight people disagreeing with each other and all that, and it's you know,
so there's so few and far. I gotta say, I just took a cross-country trip, and it is not like it is in the media out there. The United States of America is 98% on the same page. They're nice people who are kind, who are considerate of other people. Nobody's yelling at each other or trying to torch each other's cars or burn each other's houses down or shouting racist slurs. People are just nice to each other. And it's just BS. It really is. Like, they just focus in on that 2% because it sells.
It sells. I mean, and like, I always wonder, why can't people on the left and right like find the common ground and agree on that, and then like fight about all the other stuff?
It's a business model in preventing them and blocking it.
It's a big business model.
Yeah, and I think that's coming to a close. I think the internet is really putting that at risk, and I think what we're seeing now is this kind of waving around. And you know, we really, this is why I like approval voting too, because it focuses on consensus. It doesn't matter what we disagree about. What do we agree about? Let's work on that.
Get that done.
When we've exhausted that, then we can worry about the things we disagree about. And maybe some of the things we disagreed about solve themselves. Duh. I mean, it's like a no-brainer, you know? So, and that's why I'm shadow banned.
But so having these groups, you know, is part of that, is you know, allows you to gather feedback from, you know, interested people, share knowledge like you guys do in Lilac, you know, which I attend as well.
I freaking love sharing knowledge. I have burnt myself more times where I could have, like, I looked at situations in work situations. I've been like, I could have exploited this situation. And you know what? I don't care. It was worth it, because becoming true peers, becoming friends with the people around me, having their respect, that social currency is worth more to me than hoarding a piece of information. I have the password. You know, oh, sorry about that. I have the password. I have the instructions. I have the secret sauce. No one can see the secret sauce, right? You know, and people get like they always start turning into like these cackling monsters, like you know, and you can see it in meetings, and they get that beady-eyed look. You know? And you're like, oh, you're not going to help. You're just going to make another silo and make more problems for us.
See, it's interesting you bring up guilds too, because historically, sometimes guilds have been a way of keeping people out. And you look at like technology, and in a lot of ways, technology is an equalizer because it's very much merit-based. Like, if you have tech skills, you have tech skills.
Particularly at closer to the inception, the more merit-based it is. Which is one of the things I love about computers, because it's constantly changing. You can get a PhD in a subject and be mediocre. I'm not saying it's easy. You have to put a ton of work in.
It's a lot of work,
It's a lot of work. But if it's something that's really well understood, and you're willing to work maybe extra years of going to school, and you're willing to restudy things, maybe retake classes, fail a few times, you can get a PhD and become a specialist in a subject where you cannot fake being smart enough to solve a problem when crap's on fire and your network is down and people are screaming at you.
Right.
You just have to be smart or not.
Right.
You know, and sure, you're working as a team, and the different people can contribute different things. And sometimes there's unexpected properties when you put people together. Like, you know, people may be good. Someone may be good at A, someone may be good at B, someone was good at C. And you put them together, and you get something completely different in D from A and C. But you didn't expect that. But I mean, you know, you can't fake it. You know, and open source is a meritocracy. So I really cringe. There's been a lot of movement out there in the world towards what was that? What was that thing that they just did in the Linux kernel towards code of conducts? That's it. Yeah. And actually, I'm not against code of conducts, but what I don't want to see code of conducts do is create a situation where you're not mobile anymore, where merit isn't rewarded. Code of conducts cannot interfere with merit if you want to succeed. And I'm all for both a code of conduct and a meritocracy at the same time. If you can do both, and the way, of course, to do that is the same way you do anything, when you're trying to do something new and you're trying to not be negative and get bogged down in the problems, which is consensus. What do we all agree on? We all agree that this is good. We all agree this is good. We all agree this is good. Not we're going to block this or that or these. It's just that focus on the positives. And then you can form a consensus. Now, sometimes you gotta step out of that, and you have to go negative and go, okay, we gotta shut this down because it's too crazy. But usually, it's very rare. I mean, it's been my experience. It's very, very rare. You know, you could just get that consensus, and of how to do that, of how to support meritocracy.
So the other thing is, within ListenNet, I have specialized groups that meet here also. Like, we have a CEO group. That's a couple of CEOs, and once a month we meet with each other.
Oh, okay.
Share
CEOs, right?
CEOs, yeah. Okay. CEOs, you know.
You could easily have a CIO group, too.
We have a CIO group as well.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Some of the larger companies, because we have, like, Henry Schein is a member of ListenNet, PC Richard, like big companies, as well as the startups and everyone in between.
Nice.
So we meet once a month, and they kind of act as a peer advisory council to each other also. And, you know,
how are they? Are they I'm not specifically those two people you said, but like the people in those groups, are they very information hoardy, or are they more looking to share information with each other?
No, they share information. They share information.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
You know?
I wonder if that's new, or if I'm just maturing enough to notice it now.
But, you know, we keep salespeople out of it. You know, we keep it. You know, we police it.
It's not about the pitch. No, no pitches. Is that a rule?
Right. It's not. You know, I mean, look, unless the group wants a pitch.
Right. Unless there's a consensus.
Unless there's a
consensus.
We
all want the pitch. You know, please give us the pitch.
Right. You know. Right, so that's what we try to do. I mean, look, it's.
That's what we do with Lilac too. We try to. Yeah, sure. If everybody wants a pitch, go ahead and pitch it. You know, otherwise, don't do it.
It's self-managed. It's, you know, it's. ListenNet membership is a requirement, but, you know, they can join through their company, and you know, and we open it up to anyone to come check it out once for free. You know, and it's been very good. Like, they usually do presentations within themselves. Last time, this woman, Patty Smith, who's the CISO of Cox, you know, shared like a presentation she did for her executives on incident response and a cybersecurity hack. And she said, this is how I got them to understand that they should spend money on this. I said, this is what would happen if we had ransomware. And, you know, it was very useful to the group. And it's, you know, and it's interesting because,
I mean, just saving you 20 minutes in that situation could be life and death.
I think cybersecurity has made CIOs a little more open and realize that, hey, yeah, let's talk about this together, and we're all under siege with this stuff, you know?
Right.
You know, you still have, of course, like, most big companies don't admit that they're subject to ransomware, though most of them probably have been, you know? So, you know, there's probably stuff that they can't talk about, but otherwise there's things that they can, and you know, again, and through being part of a group, now they have bigger influence than them themselves, you know, both through what, you know, because some of those people in this CIO group are on the panel on Hofstra as well, and, you know.
So this actually brings up two things I wanted to talk to you about.
Sure.
Two different points. One is something we've talked about on the show before, is just how fast language is changing.
Sure.
You know, and I mean, I think I call it the rate of change is the complexity horizon. When you reach a point where the technology is going faster than the language, and this idea that you can have these just completely unnamed things, these unnamed concepts. It's the thing, it's the big great unknown. You know, there's been lots of movies where they have to name something. Sci-fi movies. You know, so but. It's the rate of change is changing. I mean, DevOps was the hot thing 2 years ago. It's gone already. I mean, honestly, in my opinion, SRE is going to be the way that people go. You know, there are exceptions. I think some people are going to go with the Darwinistic kind of Netflix model, but which doesn't have a name. I just have to call it the Netflix model. But you know, this is how fast things are changing. How do schools keep up with this?
They really can't. I mean, that's
how do you make a curriculum around something that's different every year?
It's interesting because I'm a computer science grad, but my undergrad was not. My undergrad was English and philosophy. I just did computers on my own and then came back to that. I did first did a one-year continuing ed course at Hofstra, and then I decided to get my master's. But I didn't really get my master's because I wanted to get work. I got my master's because I wanted to learn this stuff. You know, so computer science came out of math, and it really is a mathematics-based field. The problem is, it came out of the notion that, that you would you would learn this stuff and either go teach or do research, right? As a lot of academic fields were, right? It was like, wasn't like computer science wasn't mainstream until what, 1990, 1980?
Well, this is kind of coming back to what we were talking about STEM before too. You know, like where does when you have people, you're trying to teach people a conceptual framework. How do you do it? You know, it's kind of the same problem. Like what used to be computer science in the 60s or 70s was really just math. Where you're just writing down, you literally, your program might have looked like a long series of formulas when you hand wrote it, and then you translated to punch cards and you put it in the machine, and there was really like very little in between those two. Now, you have stuff like, interpreted languages, and at some point we're going to get to the point where it just says, well, this is what would have happened if we ran your program as you wrote it. And it just, like compilers that actually run bad code just as in a sandbox to show you, well, here's where it would have tanked the operating system.
But I think that they can teach getting a computer science degree makes you learn certain things and have to solve certain challenges that prepares you for doing these other things. Now, a person can learn this stuff on their own. It's not necessary for programmers to have computer science degrees. But there is a lot of useful knowledge there.
And some of the greatest programmers have not.
Some have not.
And
but
some have.
But they've certainly learned a lot of the stuff that they should know. It
does help. So there was a really interesting thing in the early days of the Linux kernel, and everybody was like, everybody knew the Linux kernel was a bunch of long-haired hippie freaks in their parents' basement writing Linux, until they actually did a survey and they found that most of them have degrees, and a lot of them are college professors. It's like, oh, I guess they're not hippies living in their parents' basement.
Yeah, so
there's something to that, to doing the bottom-up methodology, which is what computer science really is. It's bottom-up coding.
Understanding automata theory and Turing machines and what that is, and how something could be Turing Complete, and that one language is substitutable for another. I think you can more easily pick up new languages because you can kind of see the commonalities and just look at it as different, translations or things once you have that. Again, you can get to that on your own by learning multiple languages also, but I think there is value to that. I don't think you can expect schools to teach the latest stuff when it's changing so fast, because who's going to teach it,
Right.
So the question becomes, what's it worth to get this computer science education? And I was very fortunate that I was a teaching assistant at Hofstra. I got some, they covered some of my tuition. I had a company that was paying for part of it.
I mean, clearly the success cases in academia. It's not like useless.
No, but I'm saying you don't go, how many, if someone went to computer science now, they're really not looking to teach or do research for the most part, because how many teaching or research opportunities are there?
Right, right.
And if they're doing that, they're going to some like high-end school.
Right,
anyway.
right. Well, there's plenty of elementary school level teaching opportunities.
Sure.
But like in colleges, yeah.
But you're not getting a computer science degree for that.
There's a balanced market
Right.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need a computer science master's degree to teach elementary.
Right, right.
You need a master's in teaching. Yeah.
How to browse the web. Right.
So I think it's an interesting challenge. But like I said, what Hofstra's doing, other colleges are doing. But I think you can't count on the universities to teach all of it, you know?
Yeah.
And again, it becomes, you know...
Isn't it at some point the role of those user groups, of those guilds?
Yeah.
I mean, I see that becoming more important.
Yeah.
Maybe even like, you know, maybe half and half colleges and guilds.
Right.
You know, or colleges in user groups.
Well,
let's call them user groups. Not put the guild.
Yeah.
So
you know,
user groups,
yeah.
son, I'm going to teach you blacksmithing. No, it's not that.
No, but user groups are important
because that can become a legit.
But more than just as a user group, a little bit of the guildiness, let's say, is the connections you make there. So now you've gone to these groups, and now you know a bunch of people that know other people. And now you say, hey, I'm going to college. Maybe someone knows that I could get something. I mean, you know.
Right.
You know, and make a connection or possibly hire the person, you know.
Right.
One of the guys in the Linux group got a job recently through Infosys, and then he got hired by another company.
Right.
And that's because he started coming here, you know.
Right.
You know, so it's.
Oh,
you know,
there's been tons of success stories.
Right.
In our user group's been around for like 20-something years, and I mean I haven't even started to scratch the surface.
Right.
There are. I don't even want to say it because I'll let users come on and surprise everyone in a pleasant way.
But that's part of what universities offered as well, is you were getting invited into a set of connections, right? From going there.
Yes.
And still happens.
And in a way, that's what happened also even with me with the user group.
Right.
I started it in my college.
So it's the same thing. It's these user groups are providing that as well. You know. I don't know. Universities, long term, who knows what? I don't know what's going to happen.
And it's really important to me that we don't create some kind of like exclusive society. We're not a Magic the Gathering club,
right?
You know,
right?
We're not a bunch of nerds, you know, cackling and elbowing each other like, look at the new guy, you know. You know, anybody's welcome, you know, as long as they're, you know, part of the community,
right?
And whatever that means.
No,
what community means shifts over time.
But that's important. It's important to get new members. It's important to promote diversity in every way because you can become stale.
Yeah,
you know?
And it's important to have a meeting space that makes sense to people. Right. And actually, that's one of the reasons I love having you on.
Yeah.
Is it's so important that you provide this meeting space.
Right.
I mean, I don't even know if you realize how important it is.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to do it.
It's super, super important because I mean, we could have just bought a place.
Right.
You know, we've been around long enough. We have enough members. We probably could have conned people into paying us, and then just paid someone. But it doesn't match with us philosophically.
But
it makes more sense to be in a shared kind of.
But I'm careful, like
co-learning space.
I don't open the space up to everyone because to me, I have a certain vision for where I want this to be, and it's not because you're a nonprofit. It's because I've been to your meetings and I, understand what the mission is, and it aligns with the mission that we have here.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, that's what. Sometimes it's just like anything else. Sometimes you got to fail.
Right.
And we're gonna fail again, and you're gonna fail. You're gonna get, I'm sure you've had groups in that were like, businesses. I've had clients that are, I've even heard a story or two about it. People on this show, who came into the show and it was like, Yeah. So it happens. You don't know until you try.
Right.
And I think it's important. And this is the thing that's happening on the internet is that people are accepting that you can try, and that you should get another shot.
Right.
And that's what's so horrible about the censorship thing, is that you don't get another shot. You're done. Get out of here.
Right.
You can't say anything else to anyone ever again, and your network is taken from you.
Right.
Yeah, you just radicalized someone. You didn't make them, any better. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's that important that we're a nonprofit either. Actually, it was more important. I was the biggest vocal opponent to becoming a nonprofit because I thought that there was a lot of risk that the government might suddenly change the rules for what a nonprofit is, and it would just prevent us from a bunch of guys from coming and girls coming and meeting about Linux and talking about Linux. But it's been a little true. There's been some risk to us, but it hasn't been. Overall, I think it's been worth it because I think people recognize that we're trying to make an inclusive community.
Right.
That's what that means to people.
Right.
It isn't necessarily that the government has blessed us. It's just that they see we're making a continual effort to make an inclusive community.
Yeah. So one of the things we did. ListNet used to have these happy hours, and it'd be all the ListNet members. But what happened over the years, all the ListNet members knew each other. So it was like a clique. It was like, yeah, we're all getting together. So a few years ago, Peter and I decided to change the format. And when we do a happy hour, we invite other groups to do it with us. And they may not even be tech groups.
Okay.
So we're doing one April 30th. And everyone watching is invited. And everyone not watching is invited. It's at Jewel on 110. And we're doing it with a group called Women in Tech Network.
Okay.
The Urban League of Long Island, and Minority Millennials. So the idea is bring in these other groups with our group and kind of let them cross, connect, and fertilize. And it's made some interesting things happen because of that. And that these happy hours have become big. Like we used to do them, and if we got like 50, 60 people, we were happy. Now we get like over 200 people. And yes, part of it is because we're inviting these other groups, but the other part is our members don't necessarily know the people that are going to be there, so they're meeting new people. You know?
Right.
So.
And sometimes it might just be people there who just want to socialize.
Yeah.
They know someone.
Yeah. Right.
They have a connection to that community, even though they really don't feel they're part of it.
But now these people from other groups might come to a future one, and it's just really, I mean, I don't know if this was all part of your maniacal plan or if you just stepped in shit. Right. But I mean, this is kind of what I've been saying all along is that we're a freaking technocracy. You're all part of it. You better get used to communicating with us. You don't have to be a master of all trades. Right.
But this affects you.
Right.
We're making choices and decisions that are going to affect your life and change your life.
Right.
And please join us. Join the conversation. Be a part of it.
Well, that's it.
And that access, that inclusivity guarantees that the meritocracy isn't junk.
Right.
That it is a true meritocracy and it isn't just an exclusive, club where we're like, we've got our own plans and we're going to take over. We're going to meet in secret and attack the world.
Right.
What was that quote? Any organization that meets in secret is, generally not in the public interest. So, we're not like that. We don't meet in secret.
No.
And I think that's important. I mean, it's interesting in the context of women in tech, particularly.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of women have trust issues with access.
Right.
It has to be a safe space.
Right.
It can't be dark.
Right.
It can't be private.
Right.
It can't be somebody's house.
Right.
Ideally, it's a public space where people normally who aren't part of the group will meet.
Right.
So that they can just walk in the door and say, "Hey, how's it going?"
Right.
And if it gets weird, they can leave. Not because we're gonna get weird.
Right.
But how the hell do they do that?
Right. Well, I mean, we had a Women in Tech event here, and we had about 60 women here that night, and it was the only tech event I've been to where women grossly outnumbered the men. And
really?
It was like, and I was like, and this is
fist bump.
Yeah.
Good ratio, dude.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't run it.
Too much of tech is a sausage party. I hate it.
Well, but so imagine you're a woman and you're always walking into a room full of men. That's how it usually is.
Yeah.
And yes, you can make arguments that you can't just promote it for the sake of political correctness. But it's not for the sake of political correctness. There's probably some women that are very talented at tech that have been put off from tech because they had a bad first experience or they didn't feel they could relate. Mm-hmm. Less and less these days, thankfully.
Yes. It's starting. We have regular women in our groups.
Right.
It wasn't. We always have had regular women in our groups, but that's still the case.
Right.
I'd just like to see the ratio get a little bit better.
Right.
I don't know if it's because women tend to get into tech and they tend to be more business oriented and they see open source as not business.
Right.
That's completely not true, by the way. You're welcome and we want you there, and if you're working on anything that is even touches infrastructure, open source is your bag. But you want to do this.
I see it at open source, non-open source events. Every tech event I go to, it's mostly men.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so we've had experience. We had an experience. This is a long time ago. This is in the '90s.
Right.
We had an experience where a woman who the guys found attractive,
right,
who was attractive,
right,
walk into a Linux meeting,
right,
and she got hounded.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, this is again one of those things where, okay, I'm going to stop that next time. But I mean, basically every guy there was trying to pick her up.
Right.
And I think part of it is because the ratio is so bad, it becomes a self-feeding loop.
Right.
Where people are just like, they're so lonely and they're sad that there aren't women in tech.
Right.
But they don't always necessarily, they spend, not everyone is kind of a polymath like us,
right,
where you have social skills and you also have technical skills. You can sit down and deal with the unyielding computer for 9 hours a day or 10 hours a day. And so they get into the situation where they're desperately lonely and they see the one opportunity and they overreact. And it's scary.
Right.
I mean, it would scare me.
Yeah. True.
So now I always make sure that everybody that comes in, I try to go at least say hi.
Right.
And say, hey, welcome. Here's the basic rules. We basically don't have any rules. Do what you want. Socialize with who you want. Be friendly. Don't let anyone else give you another impression.
Right.
I don't know how useful that is, but I'm hoping that the women who come stay. Right. So I guess it worked.
Right. Yeah. No.
I mean, I guess that's all you can ask for, right?
That's all you can ask for. It's all you can try to do.
Right. I mean, I can't get people. Well, maybe through the show. Maybe when they see this show and they see us talking about this and it's a problem. It's a meritocracy. People are rewarded because of skills. The great thing about the computer business is that you've got everybody from every walk of life.
Right.
It's just about the meat inside your skull.
Right.
It's not about anything else. It really isn't, because we can't afford it to be about anything else. There's too much demand out there for this field.
Right. Well, it's interesting because ListenNet for many years tried to develop a women in tech group from within our own thing, and these other groups kind of spun off on their own, and I'm kind of glad they did, and now we kind of work with them. One is called Long Island Women in Tech. The other is Women in Tech Network Long Island, and just happy to see it happening and to do stuff.
And they're doing well, the groups?
They're doing well.
Excellent.
They're doing extremely well, and we're glad to support them, and just, it's very important.
Shout out, Lilac meetings.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You see, I'm laughing because someone could say, oh, that was creepy. It's not creepy.
Right.
It's not creepy. We want there to be more. Yeah. My last job actually was really great. I had the best ratio. It was 50-50 in my subgroup.
Wow.
Yeah, the Unix group was 50-50. Right. So that was the best I've ever. I don't expect to do that well again for a while.
Right.
But it wasn't bad, guys.
But
make it happen. It was fine.
Another reason for diversity is because sometimes people with the same background, same thing, think the same way, and it's good to have someone think differently.
Right. A team isn't just a pile of clones.
Right.
It's people with different. Like I was saying before.
Right.
I fucking hate the word synergy.
Right.
It's a terrible.
Oh, awful. Wow. You're gonna say synergy?
Synergy. It's true though.
Yeah.
It's true. It's rare.
Just say mojo instead.
What? So
mojo.
Mojo?
Yeah. Not quite the same, but.
Yeah. No, it's okay. Mojo. But it's just like when you put a group of people together with different skills, it has more mojo.
Right.
Than it has
a bunch of people that are the same.
A lot more. I mean, some is definitely more than the parts if the parts are different.
Right.
And and it hurts a little.
Yeah.
It's a little scary.
Right.
You're taking risks. You're going out there, you're interfacing with people who see the world differently than you.
Right.
And this is important on both sides. Also, women who just I've seen. Apparently, there's some real sexual harassment problems specifically in Maine and Chicago.
Really?
Just from a couple of people I follow on Twitter.
Huh.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems with men talking down to women, particularly. This was cybersecurity, but it could be other IT fields too.
Right.
But they're definitely in those two places.
Right.
I've seen stories where people where men were just treating women like, go home and make me a sandwich.
Right.
Pseudo make me a sandwich. Right. And fortunately, the best thing I would say, I have a lot of negative things I could say about New York, but one thing I say about New York is we got that right.
Right.
There is opportunities if you're whatever.
Right.
Any sexual orientation, any religion, any either sex, any race,
any race.
Yeah. People don't. care. They really don't.
Right.
You know, it's just about having the brains to do the job.
Right.
Wow, I didn't think we were going to go there. How are we doing at time? We're doing pretty good, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we're just about. Is there anything else that you really want to talk about? Is there anything we missed on your list? You were nice enough to make this huge list,
right?
And we talked about most of it.
I think I covered everything.
I think we covered everything.
I have an app called Eat Everywhere. That's a guide to ethnic
You wrote an app. You're a programmer and you wrote your own app.
I didn't write it,
you
but
didn't
it
even
was
plug
a
your own app.
Yeah.
That's how nice of a guy he is. He didn't even plug his own app.
Very good.
But it's very good.
It is? Oh, really?
You could it's a freemium model. You could download it for free. It's a guide to ethnic eating. My friend Jim Leff created the site chowhound.com, and out of that experience came the idea to make this app, which would explain
I've
cuisines.
heard of Chowhound.
Yeah, Chowhound was big.
Okay.
I used it for my first time eating Szechuan, and it worked
great.
really well. And I got good food because it was well described.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And
so the idea behind it is like, people are reluctant to try a restaurant if they don't know anything about the cuisine.
Right.
And there's certain things like Thai food that people know, hey, I can order pad Thai. So our idea was, let's do that for every cuisine. So we picked 75 of the most common ones. More on the way if people buy the app. And
nice.
And to do that, and then we give you, the top things that people would enjoy. We cover things for vegetarians. We cover things for fussy eaters.
It almost sounds like the Music Genome Project.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah. Originally there was a thing called the Music Genome Project, and Pandora grew out of that.
Right. Yeah.
They started classifying all music by its attributes.
Right.
And then you could just say, I like this song, and they say, oh, you might like these songs.
Yeah.
And give you good recommends.
This is more, I'm going to go to like a Turkish restaurant. What do I order? And I'm with someone that's a vegetarian. What do they get? Or
well, no, but it's still kind of the same thing. Yeah.
Or I want to be adventurous. What do I order? Or I got my kids with me. What should they get?
Oh, okay. So you give it parameters.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's the same thing.
Well, it's categories. But anyway, check it out. You can download it for free, and then you can pay $5 and unlock everything else.
All right,
great.
It's a labor. And what is it available? Is it just Android or is
Android
it
and iOS?
iOS.
Yeah. It's a labor of love.
Great.
A lot of us worked on it, and
the name of it was
Eat Everywhere.
Eat Everywhere. Okay.
Eat Everywhere. Yeah.
All right. Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's really awesome. I'm going to check it out, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Sure.
Thank you for hosting having these guys in your tech incubator.
Yeah.
And thanks for having Lilug be part of your tech incubator too.
We're glad to have you guys.
This meeting here, and I hope you guys get more user groups. And thanks so much for being on my show.
It was fun.
Right. All right.
All right.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Paul Trapani.
Trapani.
No, I did it again. Oh! You know what? I wrote it out phonetically. Paul Trapani. Thank you.